Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to episode 38 of Gish Gallop Girl. I'm your main research guy, Candace Owens, debunker hobbyist, disliker of self-joy, pursuer of the next endorphin hit on No Man's Sky, and an all-around Scotch appreciator, Thomas Anderson. And with me is...
I didn't know you'd pull out all of that in one go.
Yeah.
But his son, Matthew Anderson.
That's right. And tonight we are discussing Candace Owens' series, A Shot in the Dark, episode 12, the polio vaccine.
If I knew you were going to pull out all of that, I would have prepped something.
That's why I don't tell you what I write.
That's fair.
Now, right off the top here, I thought that episode 11 was the last episode that ran on Daily Wire.
Mm-hmm.
I was wrong.
Oh.
Episode 11 is the last one that was listed on her Patreon.
Okay.
Yeah. However, all of the episodes, I found out, were on Daily Wire Plus. All 20 of the initial episodes. But for some reason, for whatever reason, she stopped putting the rest of the series on her Patreon. And then, of course, she took the whole thing over to Club Candace. I was alerted to this by someone that used to nanny for her, but woke up to how horrible she is after what was described to me as a vicious rant. And the nanny in question went as far as to leave the state of Tennessee entirely. That is all that I've been allowed to say about that, but she did inform me that all 20 of the episodes were done on DW+. So she has actually not done anything new in this series for Club Candace members. The nanny is a regular listener, and as far as I am concerned, a valuable member of the audience. She has promised to rejoin our Patreon if we do one in the future. Anyway, I will not be updating past episodes unless I feel like it, so on with the show.
And thank you, Nanny, I suppose.
Yeah. The audio is better on this one than the past episodes, but Candace sounds a bit like a little girl in the audio here. Yeah, like y'all will hear it. I'm just noting it at the top. The only thing I cut out was a 1-minute timer at the start of it that had no audio. It ran as a countdown to the episode itself.
Okay.
Like going live in... And it kind of counted it down.
Yeah, back when I used to have friends that were streamers, they'd have those pop up.
Yeah.
Be like one of the first 3 people present, and they'd have like a 30-second timer of bear with us, we're still getting things set up.
Yeah. Yeah, this was basically that. Like everything from 12 to 20 starts with that first minute being a timer. Yeah. So, at any rate, here's the first clip.
I'm on a journey to ask the questions that it feels like we're not supposed to ask, to look at the data that we're maybe not meant to see. I mean, I'm not an expert, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, but I am a mother. It's not advice that I want to give people, it's simply the courage to ask questions. I just want us all to be informed so that we never have to take a shot in the dark.
I'm sorry. Okay, at least she's being honest. She's not a doctor, nor is she an expert.
Yeah.
But I'm not here to give anybody advice. I'm just here to allow people to make questions.
Yeah, an interesting bit of writing there.
Especially considering, I think was it her last episode? She was answering a commenter question at the head of her episode and was just going, look, if you don't align with what I say, go fuck yourself.
Basically. Yeah, I see that as a very careful disclaimer on her part.
Yeah.
And as a way to use the good old-fashioned line of, quote, just asking questions, end quote, to say very stupid, oftentimes very fucked up things.
Yeah.
Tucker Carlson is known for saying, quote, I'm just asking questions, end quote, as are several others in this media sphere. But Candace puts it right out there in this, and I believe the rest of these episodes. Anyway, here is the start of the actual material.
All right, guys, let's jump right into episode 12, as I promised you last week. This week, we're going to talk about polio And I say that with much excitement because I feel like this is really what sits at the nucleus of so much parental fear when it comes to vaccines. When you talk about, oh, I don't vaccinate my child, the first thing people will say is either, what about tetanus or what about polio? Which is why I was very happy to unpack tetanus with you guys a few weeks ago. But polio is the one that I think I probably get the most feedback regarding online. I make fun of people, but what about polio? We eradicated polio. Polio is apparently all of the proof that we need as an American society that vaccines work, right? That's the storyline. We eradicated polio, and we're going to have things like polio come back if you don't vaccinate your child. You've heard this before. You're familiar with this idea. And so we're going to have to unpack this one very slowly. First and foremost, before we jump into it, I just want to tell you guys that we are going to be taking this show down to a bi-weekly show once every 2 weeks because I am working on multiple documentaries. I'm also 6 months pregnant. We have a...
Okay. I know, you're confused.
Hold. Yep. I know you're probably about to answer the question, but wasn't she just giving birth at the end of the last one?
I've written so much on this.
Okay. Also, secondly, did we actually cover tetanus?
Yeah. It was one of the first ones.
I must be blessed with the ability to block things out of my memory.
Yeah. Yeah, tetanus was one of the first ones in this series. I'm not sure which one it was right off the bat. But
wait, yeah, she started with the T and Tdap.
Yeah, now you get it,
Yeah, now I remember, unfortunately.
So I had to look into this more. Episode 11 has an official release date of July 21st, 2023. And this one has an official release date on IMDb of August 4th, 2023. But the Patreon listing for episode 11 was June 24th of 2022. Which is well over a year earlier. All of the other episodes on her Patreon are also from 2022. Also, she was ready to give birth to her daughter on July 13th of 2022. I haven't found any reason for all of this discrepancy. From what I can tell, this is how it all shook out. Candace started her official work on Daily Wire on March 19th of 2021. A Shot in the Dark premiered in 2022 on Patreon. She then took it to Daily Wire Plus and finished the next 9 episodes on there. I want to point out what I said before, though, that she was employed at Daily Wire in March of 21, produced the first 11 episodes of this series in 22, and it ended there with the birth of her second kid. The child she is talking about being pregnant with here is the third kid, her second son, on the Daily Wire release schedule. There are 2 weeks between episode 11 and episode 12. I really do hate this murder board type of bullshit. What I think I continue to find more disgusting, though, is that all of this is so disjointed. What she released on Patreon did not transfer to how the Daily Wire episodes are named and numbered, but it is all the same bullshit. Anyway, hopefully what we have here is just what it is moving forward. That all said, she is still making episodes, I've learned.
Oh, what?
Yeah, I thought this would end with episode 20. But I logged into the Club Candace site to see for myself again if anything new had been posted. Unfortunately, it has. She is on episode 25 of this damn series.
What the fuck?
But anything past episode 20, I do not expect to be able to cover for some time. The episodes on Club Candace so far I haven't found out in the wild. But since we probably won't be through this series until December of 2025 anyway, I'm not sweating it.
Mm-hmm.
If it comes out later that I can't get my hands on the Club Candace material, then I'm fine with that for now. My goal from the start has been to push back on things that people could easily obtain of hers. Whether that was a podcast, an interview, her books, or this series, I have looked to debunk the items that have the most chance of cultural impact. We are going through this series because even though it was originally only on Patreon and fucking Parler, and then only on Daily Wire, these episodes are still being shared on Rumble. But there is a weird side note to that. I mentioned before that the user on Rumble that had uploaded all of these episodes went by the name Dennis BB. When I went looking for the newer material, anything past 20, I couldn't find anything by him. And his channel seemed erased. I assumed it must have been maybe lawsuit driven or something like that. But looking around for more information, I saw a couple of posts stating that Dennis BB, who was considered an archivist at Rumble, had passed away.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. Several RIP posts on Twitter basically called that out. And when I went looking for this material on Rumble further, everyone that had posted the videos had done so with Dennis BB tagged as the source. So from what I know, Dennis BB passed away before any of the newer stuff could be uploaded to Rumble. And then his channel was cut off, basically.
Damn.
But I'm okay with that, in whatever version of it is the truth. Because if Candace is keeping the newer episodes from 21 going forward as exclusives on Club Candace, and no one is kicking them out to the mainstream, then the impact they can have should be small.
Yeah, because it would only be Club Candace members.
Yeah, paying close to $18 a month for the privilege.
Yeah. So, if that's the case, it's not as bad, but also, R.I.P. Dennis.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even if you might have been a questionable person, you were at least, making life easy.
Yeah. Dude was archiving and putting stuff out there onto Rumble. I think for like all of the worst people.
Yeah.
We just happen to be white hats that got the material.
Yeah.
But as long as that stuff, as long as, if I find a way to get those episodes otherwise, episodes here will be done on them. But since that's probably not going to happen, my plan moving forward, and I'm not sure if I cover this in the script or not, my plan for this show moving forward, once we're through A Shot in the Dark, and I get a chance to really see how the political winds are blowing, we may restart our Patreon in January of 26.
Okay.
I want to give it more time.
Yeah.
And I want to get through this material. I'm thinking about doing it then because, again, that's plenty of time to see how things are going. And also, we will have gotten through this stuff, but my plan for the show moving forward is not to dive back into Candace's present-day material.
Yeah.
I'm going to go all the way back, as far back as I can, back to her Red Pill Black days on YouTube. And I'm going to see if I want to trace the madness.
Okay.
I'm
sorry, was that the first thing she ever did?
Red Pill Black? Yeah, Red Pill Black was her original first name on YouTube. Before she got doxxed as Candace Owens, she was known as Red Pill Black.
Of all the names,
look, I will give her branding.
Yeah, yeah.
She knows how to brand her shit. Yeah, and so
not red pilled, but red pill.
Red Pill Black, all one word, lowercase. Red Pill Black was her original YouTube channel.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, she had posted videos on there like, "Mom, Dad, I'm a conservative." Like that's literally one of her first video titles. That was where she really got noticed.
Okay.
And she was showing up on like several different right-wing talk shows. And, she had already had, like anyone who knew her before was like, oh shit, that's Candace.
Yeah.
And I don't know how it got out there. I'm pretty sure I'll find out.
Yeah.
At some point. But,
I'm sure she's probably got a video about how she's...
About being outed.
Yeah, about being outed and probably about how funny it is that these people are so zealous to cancel her.
But once she got doxxed, I haven't looked into what impact that might have had on her life. But what I want to do, and it is really tempting to go after the current mainstream shit on her, such as her wanting to stop supporting Trump, and her current lawsuit with Brigitte Macron and Emmanuel Macron.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's tempting to follow that path, but it's also chasing the dragon. And we only do this like every 2 weeks. A lot of shit can happen in that realm of time, or nothing can happen.
Yeah.
In that realm of time, because the court system moves at its own pace. So I was like, well, I don't want to do that. And a lot of what she does these days is just kind of like Like, she didn't put out a single video last week.
Yeah.
Granted, neither did we.
Yeah.
I got a little bit behind. And once we get into the real weeds of this polio vaccine shit, maybe y'all will understand. But yeah, we didn't do a video last week. Well, Candace said she had told her fans that she was taking a week off.
Yeah.
People on the subreddit are up and down about why that was. Like, it was either to take a week off or to prepare for the next series of her becoming Brigitte shit.
Yeah.
Some people were like, maybe she's preparing for the lawsuit.
Yeah.
Because I have released it before several times. I think I'm getting known for it. On Reddit, I have released several times a link to the 219-page lawsuit brought on by the Macrones. Like, now, anyone who says, oh, where's the photographic proof of her claims? It's in the lawsuit.
Yeah.
It's in the it's in like the first 10 pages of the PDFs. There's fucking pictures in there. So there's no excuse why people can't just look at that shit.
Yes, there is. Laziness.
Yeah, laziness. Laziness and not wanting to confront the actual truth of things.
Yeah.
And among the actual truth is the Macrones kept quietly furnishing Candace Owens with the photographs and the evidence that she said she would, she said if presented with evidence, she would retract her story. But she was getting so much attention and so many clicks, it became like her Sandy Hook.
Yeah.
It became her Sandy Hook. And, I don't think she understood what Sandy Hook did to Alex Jones.
Yeah.
But she pissed off millionaires that have more money than her husband.
Yeah, and way more money than the Sandy Hook families had.
Yeah. And they've got more pull.
Yeah.
They're not going to let this die because it has fucked with their personal lives. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to fuck with a world leader, you don't fuck with their personal lives unless you are absolutely in the right, and she knew she never was.
Yeah.
Especially when they started, coming after her personally, like, hey, this is everything you asked for. Please stop. Please retract. Mm-hmm. And she just doubled down.
Yeah.
They traced it through. They're like, we provided this evidence, and then she released these T-shirts.
Yeah.
And she did this and this and this. Yeah, it is a damning 219-page blow by blow of everything.
Yeah. Man, she really dug a hole there for her and her husband.
Yeah, because he's named in the lawsuit too. He's named in the lawsuit. They're both being sued.
Yeah.
In the same lawsuit by the Macrones. And yeah, his businesses are called out. Her businesses are called out. The fact that she incorporated her business in Delaware. Yeah. She incorporated her business in Delaware for the same reason that a lot of businesses get incorporated in Delaware, which is very low tax rates.
I didn't know that was the reason why companies get...
Yeah. It's the reason why a lot of credit card companies were located in Delaware, were headquartered there, was for a lot of tax reasons. But, Mrs. I don't like New England, I don't like all of these vaccine mandates these places are doing, then why don't you locate your business in a friendly state?
Yeah.
Because it's all about the fucking grift. It's all about the money.
Yep.
And, yeah, so... But like I was saying though, like I don't want to chase that because it's that court case is going to take time, and unless there's developments in it, I don't really see a reason to chase that right now. What I want to see though is I want to see if I can somehow trace, and I want to start doing it with the website as well, because I haven't been. The website is just basically a placeholder, but I want to start tracking as I go through her earliest work, and we travel through all the Daily Wire crap to the present day. I want to see if I can trace the fascism, trace the madness.
Yeah. Figure out where it started and how it's carried.
Yeah, because One of her earliest videos, one of her earlier, well, not earlier, but like within the last couple of years, one of her podcasts on Daily Wire has a title that's something like, "I don't care if you're a gay conservative, I'm not your ally."
Never mind her gay conservative
friends.
Yeah.
Several. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That she talks about regularly, highly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You know, so that's the kind of thing that I'm like, what happened here?
Yeah.
So yeah, I just that's going to be, you know,
that's going to be that's going to take its time, and probably by the time that's done, the lawsuit might be cleared.
Well, there might be developments. Like I said, I don't mind reporting on developments, but right now the only development is that it was filed.
Yeah.
But she came back today. She's been off of work up until today. So like Monday through Wednesday, she didn't do a show of this week.
Which I find funny because we just started. You just mentioned today that she hasn't been.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then like earlier today, I was on the subreddit, and somebody had posted up that Candace had just posted a video, and I was like, okay, and she's basically just giving the Macrones the middle finger. In what I read, and I was like, well, all right.
That's...
You know, we'll see how this goes. I mean...
You've been doing this for a minute now, lady, and they are giving it right back. Are you sure you want to...
Yeah. Like, the smartest thing for her to do would be to back off, but no. She's doubling down on stupid, so, you know, that's going to be whatever. But, yeah, like I said, all of that stuff, everything that I want to go through going forward is going to be whatever's publicly available. Mm-hmm. Now, if I happen to find later episodes of A Shot in the Dark on something like Vimeo or Rumble or some other off-brand YouTube, I will take those and I will consider what to do with them. But for right now,
Fair enough.
Yeah. So, let's move on. Candace is about to say some very funny things.
A lot going on, and this show, obviously, we are committed to maintaining a high caliber of research, making sure that everything is fact checked, and that we give you guys so many materials. In order to make sure that every episode includes all of that, we just want to give ourselves more time between each episodes.
Yeah, who knew that she had a sense of humor?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
she even had humor to begin with.
Yeah. I mean, I cannot imagine for a second that she or her team of 2 other people ever did much more than surface research on any of this stuff. And most of that seems to have come from bullshit sources. But let's let her continue.
All right, so back to polio. What even is polio? What are we talking about? Well, we're talking about poliomyelitis. And what that is, according to the World Health Organization, a highly infectious disease caused by a virus. It invades the nervous system and can cause total paralysis in a matter of hours. The virus is transmitted by person to person, spread mainly through the fecal-oral route, or, less frequently, by a common vehicle, for example, contaminated water or food, and multiplies in the intestine. Initial symptoms are fever, fatigue, headache, vomiting, stiffness of the neck, and pain in the limbs. 1 in 200 infections leads to irreversible paralysis, usually in the legs. Among those paralyzed, 5 to 10% die when their breathing muscles become immobilized. Polio mainly affects children under 5 years of age. However, anyone of any age who is unvaccinated can contract the disease. And therein lies all of our fear as a parent. Oh my gosh, this mainly impacts children beneath the age of 5 years old. How could I ever decline this vaccination for my child? CDC also pretty much replicates this message on its website. It says polio was once one of the most feared diseases in the United States. Before polio vaccines became available in the 1950s, polio paralyzed more than 15,000 people each year in the United States. Thanks to widespread polio vaccination in the United States, wild polio has been eliminated, with no cases occurring in the country since 1979. I really want you to remember that date, 1979. That is...
Okay, so the World Health Organization and the CDC pages on polio are linked in the link stack in the description of our episode. I had to go looking for them since any open public resource on her links is long gone. Yeah. We'll get into that later.
Uh,
Anyway, I went looking for the part about 1979 on the CDC main polio page, the subpages, and on the WHO pages, the World Health Organization, WHO.
Not the band The Who.
No, not Doctor Who either. The third link in the link stack comes from the CDC Pink Book, known more professionally as the Epidemiology and Prevention of Vaccine-Preventable Diseases. It is known as a comprehensive resource for professionals on exactly what the title says: the Epidemiology and Prevention of Vaccine-Preventable Diseases. It actually does mention 1979 several times as the last year that wild polio was in America, and it came through some imported items in an Amish community.
Wow.
Yeah. I wasn't sure where Candace was going with this, but of course I let her continue. And she goes very far afield with all of this stuff. But it is also a mainstay of the anti-vax community, I found out. Anyway, here she goes.
When we declared that polio had been eradicated from this country, and it is going to become crucial. Remember that date as we dive further into the history. So, also according to the World Health Organization, in 1945, agricultural and commercial usage of a product known as DDT became widespread in the United States. DDT is very central to everything that we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to talk about what exactly that chemical compound is and what its effects are. It goes on to state that the early popularity of DDT, a member of the chlorinated hydrocarbon group, was due to its reasonable cost, effectiveness, persistence, and versatility. During the 30 years prior to its cancellation, a total of approximately 1.3 billion pounds of DDT was used domestically. After 1959, DDT usage in the United States declined greatly, dropping from a peak of approximately 80 million pounds in that year, that's 1959, to just under 12 million pounds in the early 1970s. So what we are learning from that passage is that DDT, which was an agricultural compound, it was a pesticide, was being used dramatically beginning in 1945. And then we learned that in the early 1970s, suddenly it was no longer being used in the United States and also other parts of the world.
That is because, according to link number 4 in the stack, which is to a paper on CEC.org, and if you're going to spell that out, think of Calvin Edward Calvin, CEC.org, titled History of DDT in North America to 1997. Now I'm going to quote from that page. In 1969, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the USDA, canceled the registration of certain uses of DDT on shade trees, on tobacco, in the home, and in aquatic environments, after studying the persistence of DDT residues in the environment. Applications on crops, commercial plants, wood products, and for building purposes were canceled by the USDA in 1970. Under the authority of the Environmental Protection Agency, the registrations of the remaining DDT products and DDT metabolites were canceled on January 4th, 1973 with the following exemptions. DDT could be used in public health use for control of vector-borne diseases, USDA or military use for health quarantine, and use in prescription drugs for controlling body lice. All of these remaining uses were voluntarily canceled due to failure to pay maintenance fees by October 1989. The fact that there are no registrations means that DDT cannot be used in the United States, nor can it be imported for use as a pesticide product. At present, the United States does not have the legislative authority to prohibit production of DDT if a manufacturer wanted to initiate such production in the future. However, DDT is not currently manufactured in the United States. There have been recent reports of DDT exports and imports entering or leaving the United States. But the EPA believes that the exports are actually small quantities of reference standards being shipped between laboratories and as such, they are subject to the export notification requirements of the Toxic Substances Control Act, or TSCA, which has no de minimis cutoff for notification. The imports may also have occurred when the Department of Defense, the DoD, recalled its existing stocks for destruction. The DoD no longer uses DDT in any of its operations abroad and does not maintain a stockpile. No maximum residue levels are in effect, although there are numerous action levels for a wide variety of crops, ranging from 0.05 parts per million to 5 parts per million. So, Candace will go, end quote, sorry. Candace will go on to make a lot of hay out of DDT in this episode, but I want everyone to remember this basic information. DDT was all but stopped for use by 1973, with all licenses for special use stopped by 1989. Candace will continue to use bogus research to back up her claim that puts the use of DDT much later to 1979 as a total stoppage. I found this information with very little effort. Anyway, let's let her continue.
Well, you know, her team of fact checkers love doing their job.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's terrible, terrible fucking students, all of them. Here's the next clip.
And again, as I said, that's going to be crucial later on. The reason for that, they stipulate, is because the EPA came into effect and they realized that there were some toxic effects to the chemical compound DDT. Now, I want to say this first and foremost. If you were a person and you were growing up throughout this time period, if you're growing up in the 1950s and you're growing up in the 1960s, these people to this day, I believe, remain the most committed people to vaccines. When you speak to that generation, for those of them that are still alive today, they will tell you that vaccines work, and they will tell you about how they lived through polio, and you will never be able to untether them from their belief that vaccines work because they lived through an actual real polio epidemic. So let's take a look at what those polio numbers were throughout that time period through the 1940s and the huge epidemic that took place leading up to the 1950s. We're going to revisit that American Medical Association chart that I've showed you in previous episodes. So there are two lines that are dedicated on this chart to poliomyelitis. There's the acute version, there's the paralytic version, and you can see that there really was an explosion of cases prior to the vaccine. We're looking at from 1941 to 1950, 19,794 cases of the acute version, 16,316 cases of the paralytic version, and deaths, 1,393 deaths in that same time period of the acute, and 1,879 deaths from the paralytic. But then within just that 10-year period, there's an absolute explosion. And this actually tells you, this is what it represents, the peak of polio in this country. That date, they have it as 1949 is when we apparently experienced a peak of acute poliomyelitis. That is 42,033 cases plus 2,720 deaths. And regarding paralytic polio, 21,269 cases in 1952 and 3,145 deaths. That's a lot of cases of paralysis when you're talking about children. To think that 42,000 children were being paralyzed from this virus, 42,000 children rather were acquiring this virus. You can understand why people were terrified of this, again, if you lived throughout this time. But again, we're seeing that for whatever reason in this time period from 1941 to up until 1952, there was an explosion. That's almost double the amount of cases at the beginning of 1941 versus the end of that same decade in 1949.
Okay. Candace is reading from the chart she went to for her bad takes back to episode 35 of our show, which was episode 9 of this series. I've included the link in the stack again. Now, I want to say that Candace is actually reading from the chart, and she is reading it correctly. I have included both the link to the article and to the chart itself in the stack. But this only accounts for America. As we said in that episode, we have to look a bit further afield for more damning information. Worldwide, the virus either killed or paralyzed 500,000 people per year, most of them children from about the late 19th into the mid-20th century. This can be found at a link in the stack from the WHO. Moving on. This is another example of Candace using liar statistics, as she often does. Polio wasn't just a thing in America. It affected children around the world. Right here, though, Candace gets into old advertisements.
You were a parent throughout this time and you had a child. Of course, the vaccine campaign that ensued was really relevant, and it was also very terrifying for you. And I'm going to show you some old ads that were going out that were telling you to fight polio. They always featured children, very scary. Here is a young girl. She has crutches. And the ad says, polio has returned to America. The National Immunization for Polio Prevention in Infants and Toddlers campaign. Don't wait to vaccinate. Again, you see an image like that of this poor little girl being crippled, and you can imagine as a parent, you're not going to wait to vaccinate her.
Yeah, that ad actually ran in the UK. Polio has returned to America was a threat in the UK. In the UK, polio outbreaks were a thing in the late 1950s and the early 1960s, and the ad she read was one of several during that time that ran in the United Kingdom. Now, Candace will go on to link DDT and polio.
Okay, this is something that I should do. Here is another one. Again, they're using an image of a little girl. She's got a bow in her hair. She looks scared. She's got braces around her knees. It says, fight polio, join the March of Dimes. So what you're basically seeing here is that people from that generation were inundated, by the way, with these images, inundated with this idea that they had to fight polio, terrified by this concept that their young children were going to be paralyzed, that their young children were not going to ever be able to walk again, or worse, that their young children were going to die. And that, of course, motivated them to get the vaccine. But I'll ask the question, could there have been something else that was going on throughout that decade? Why was it from the early period of the 1940s up until 1952 that America faced the most cases of polio that they had ever faced? Why was that represent the peak? And the answer lies in that product that we mentioned earlier, which is DDT.
Yeah, we actually have an answer to her question.
Oh.
The next link in the stack from the website, Our World in Data, says, quote, why did we see such large outbreaks of polio only in the 20th century? Or in other words, why did the transition from the endemic to the epidemic phase take place? The answer lies with hygiene standards. As polio is transmitted via the fecal-oral route, the lack of flush toilets and the lack of safe drinking water meant that children in the past had usually been exposed to the polio virus before their first birthday.
God.
Yeah. At such a young age, children still benefit from passive immunity, which is passed on from their mothers in the form of antibodies. These are proteins that identify the polio virus as something foreign and therefore signal to the body that they should be eliminated by the immune system. Thereby, virtually all children would contract the polio virus at a very young age. In addition, while protected from developing the disease thanks to the maternal antibodies, children would also produce memory cells in response to the virus, which ensured long-term immunity against polio. The latter is important as the mother's cells have a half-life of only around a month, starting from the last day of breastfeeding. Once the maternal antibodies decrease sufficiently, children lose their passive immunity. As hygiene standards improved, the average age at which children were first exposed to the polio virus increased, which meant that maternal antibodies were no longer present to protect children from polio. For example, during 5 epidemics in the U.S., between 1907 and 1912, most reported cases occurred in 1 to 5-year-olds, whereas during the 1950s, the average age of contraction was 6 years, with a substantial portion of cases occurring among teenagers and young adults. Being exposed to the polio virus after losing the protection from maternal antibodies meant that they were more likely to get polio, which increased the number of cases and deaths around the start of the 20th century. So that is your answer. And of course, the full article has been linked. For Candace, who is all about natural stuff like breastfeeding, she should know this information, one would assume.
One would hope, but...
Yeah. But of course, it doesn't fit into her version of events. And we have to allow her to continue.
Oh, but
yeah. Uh-huh.
Because she's likely been vaccinated and all of that.
Oh, yeah.
She doesn't have the viruses present in her body to pass them off as antibodies to her child. So, in the long run, her child has been screwed over because her child doesn't get the passive natural antibodies that should come from her being infected.
Her 4 children.
Yeah, I forget that she has 4 of them.
4. Yeah.
Those poor bastards.
Yeah. Yeah. So, here's the next clip. We have to allow her to continue.
Here's an article actually from the Daily Mail. They actually unearthed all of this back in 2018, and they show even further images. It says shocking 1940s videos shows how the U.S. So what exactly is DDT? Well, if you were alive in the 1940s, it was being pitched to you as a miracle pesticide. You could get rid of virtually any and all bugs with this. This was a huge push. No ticks on me, DDT. I'm going to take you guys to the EPA website and tell you what they have listed. A brief history and status of DDT. So DDT is short.
Okay. Before she continues, I started playing the wrong clip because I had it numbered wrong.
Oh.
But we're going to come back around to that one eventually. Okay. At any rate, I'm going to let her continue.
For dichlorodiphenyl trichloroethane. And it was developed as the first of the modern synthetic insecticides in the 1940s. It was initially used with great effect to combat malaria, typhus, and other insect-borne human diseases among both the military and the civilian populations. It was also effective for insect control in crop and livestock production, institutions, homes, and gardens. DDT's quick success as a pesticide and broad use in the United States and other countries led to the development of resistance by many insect pest species. In terms of its regulation, the United States Department of Agriculture, the federal agency which was responsible for regulating pesticides before the formation of the EPA, began regulatory actions in the 1950s and the 1960s to prohibit many of DDT's uses because of mounting evidence of the pesticide's declining benefits and environmental and toxicological effects. So that becomes really important. Suddenly there was this concern, hey, we have been promoting this product, but actually it might be causing some toxicity, and we're going to talk about what specifically that toxicity was, but not before we just show you how aggressively this was being used throughout the United States and all over the world, by the way, but the images that I'm going to show you are from the United States.
Okay, naturally, I am linking the article she talked about there and which she read from for a bit. There isn't a whole lot of information on the initial page itself, so I'm going to go through it so we can keep it in mind as she continues on her bullshit. Starting from the top, which she read from, DDT, not going to read out the whole thing, was developed as the first of the modern synthetic insecticides in the 1940s. It was initially used with great effect to combat malaria, typhus, and the other insect-borne human diseases among both military and civilian populations. It also was effective for insect control in crop and livestock production, institutions, homes, and gardens. DDT's quick success as a pesticide and broad use in the United States and other countries led to the development of resistance by many insect pest species. So they used a lot of it, and the very things they were trying to kill developed resistance.
Okay.
So, regulation due to health and environmental effects. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, the federal agency with responsibility for regulating pesticides before the formation of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency in 1970, began regulatory actions in the late 1950s and 60s to prohibit many of DDT's uses because of mounting evidence of the pesticide's declining benefits and environmental and toxicological effects. The publication in 1962 of Rachel Carson's Silent Spring stimulated widespread public concern over the dangers of improper pesticide use and the need for better pesticide controls. In 1972, EPA issued a cancellation order for DDT based on its adverse environmental effects, such as those to wildlife, as well as its potential human health risks. Since then, studies have continued, and a relationship between DDT exposure and reproductive effects in humans is suspected based on studies in animals. In addition, some animals exposed to DDT in studies developed liver tumors. As a result, today DDT is classified as a probable human carcinogen by U.S. and international authorities. DDT is known to be very persistent in the environment, will accumulate in fatty tissues, and can travel long distances in the upper atmosphere. After the use of DDT was discontinued in the United States, its concentration in the environment and animals has decreased, but because of its persistence, residues of concern from historical use still remain. The current status: since 1996, EPA has been actively participating in international efforts to control the use of DDT and other persistent organic pollutants used around the world. Under the auspices of the United Nations Environment Program, countries joined together and negotiated a treaty to enact global bans or restrictions on persistent organic pollutants, also known as POPs. POPs. Magnitude.
Paps, get the car. Oh, God. Fucking.
A group that includes DDT. This treaty is known as the Stockholm Convention on POPs. That convention bans all uses of DDT except for a limited exemption for the use of DDT to control mosquitoes that transmit the microbe that causes malaria, a disease that still kills millions of people worldwide. DDT is one of 12 pesticides recommended by the World Health Organization for indoor residual spray programs, particularly for use in African countries where malaria remains a major human health problem. It is up to individual countries to decide whether to use DDT. The EPA works with other agencies and countries to advise them on how DDT programs are developed and monitored, with the goal that DDT be used only within the context of integrated vector management. Integrated vector management is a decision-making process for use of resources to yield the best possible results in vector control and that it be kept out of agricultural sectors. That is the entire information on the webpage, and it has links to more information at the bottom. So right there in the materials she provided, widespread use of DDT in America was pretty much over with in 1972. Candace didn't read that part, though.
No. Well, that would make things okay.
Yeah. Well, because she's trying to sell a version of events that links DDT with polio symptoms. It's gross, but we have to let her keep digging the hole.
So at first, what we have here is a video of what was the DDT campaign to combat infantile paralysis. This is a video from 1945, and it was seen, these are images that you're going to see in San Antonio, Texas. Take a listen.
With the possibility of a serious infantile paralysis epidemic, health authorities of the city of San Antonio, Texas, attacked the germ carriers throughout the city. With the war-discovered DDT and special sprayers, sections of the city are blanketed with the insecticide in the fight to stop the spread of the dread poliomyelitis. Even the streams are disinfected, and in the parks and public places, children are forbidden to gather.
So that image, that video rather, is quite stunning, especially when we are going to learn about just how much of a poison and a toxin DDT actually is.
Yeah, so about the video and the content first. Candace only played a small clip of what was about 57 seconds from a newsreel at the time. These newsreels would play in theaters between shows when people didn't have televisions to watch the news at home, and they wanted to see what the radio obviously couldn't show them. Anyway, I am going to play the full clip. I have linked to not only a player of the clip, which can be found on YouTube, but also a short article explaining it. Give me just a second to set that up. Okay, so here is the audio of the video that is included in the links. The National Archives. Universal News, Volume 19, Reel 506.
With the possibility of a grave infantile paralysis epidemic, San Antonio health authorities attacked germ carriers on a citywide front. With war-discovered DDT and special sprayers, sections of the city are literally fogged with the insecticide in the fight to stop the spread of polio. Every suspected spot is sprayed. Drastic cleanup is ordered as polio and allied diseases show alarming increase. Even streams come in for disinfecting, and in the parks precautions are taken to prevent gatherings of youngsters. Literally tons of DDT are used on this dread disease that attacks our young.
Again, war, destructive and terrible, contributes one of its discoveries to save life.
End of recording. So we just watched that. So you saw on the video. What did you see?
Oh, firstly, the fucking spray trucks that looked like rolling fog machines.
Yeah, they basically were.
And the use of DDT on people's window screens.
Yeah.
Fucking the screen doors, going down the city street, spraying people.
Fogging the streets of San Antonio.
That still had people in them.
Yeah. Yeah, people just casually like walking around. Like, I recommend clicking the link in the thing. It's from the National Archives. Clicking they have the story, but oh my god, the video is something horrible. The video is on YouTube. Again, I totally recommend checking that out, because you have to see how, like, they were making clouds of this shit, and just to the point where the only thing you could see when the truck turned a corner was the truck.
Yeah.
Like, they fogged the streets with DDT.
And the
And like he was saying too, they were spraying, like, they had kids like spraying with little pump sprayers. They were spraying on screen windows of this house, and they had like livestock walking around in the back. Yeah, in the background of this one place.
The first truck they show fogs horse and carriage.
Yeah. Like horse and carriage walk past and it gets fogged.
Yeah.
The part where they talk about, they don't, like, just before the part where they talk about kids are warned not to be in parks, there was a sign that they showed on a nailed into a tree. No persons under age 21 may enter. And this being San Antonio, they were spraying along the Guadalupe River.
Yeah.
That runs through the town. That's the streams part that they were talking about. Now, they didn't do that all over the country. We're going to get into why they were doing it in San Antonio, because I copied from the story. So yeah, in case anyone didn't quite understand that, I'll try to explain by reading from the short article attached to it. This week in Universal News, spraying DDT to prevent polio, 1946. In 1955, after years of research and testing, the polio vaccine created by Jonas Salk was declared safe and effective. The devastating virus is nearly eradicated in the United States today. In 1946, however, 2 years before Jonas Salk first began his research, the city of San Antonio, Texas, tried to prevent the spread of a polio outbreak by dousing the city with DDT, apparently in a misguided effort to kill insects they believed carried the disease. Most people today know that spraying DDT will not prevent polio and can actually harm one's health. Rachel Carson's Silent Spring from 1962 exposed the hazards of commonly used pesticides, and the chemical was mostly banned in the early 1970s. From the release sheet, City gets DDT treatment, San Antonio, Texas. To check the spread of polio, this Lone Star City used up-to-date methods, spraying the entire town with insect-killing DDT. Special vehicles and individuals helped lay down a smokescreen. So there you have it. The video is horrifying, since we can look back at what they were doing, but fogging the streets in the Guadalupe River in San Antonio in an effort to kill DDT was obviously misguided. But Candace isn't done.
An effort to kill polio.
Yeah. God.
Now, I did also see the woman was using a pump that I've only ever seen in a Tom and Jerry rerun on Boomerang.
Yeah, where they've got, like, where they're holding the thing and they've got, like, it's basically an air pump.
Yeah.
And the poison is in a chamber underneath, and you pump it kind of like a handheld bicycle pump.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, those were common.
Yeah.
For that kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, Candace isn't done. Nope.
Here's an article actually from the Daily Mail. They actually unearthed all of this back in 2018, and
Actually?
they show even further images. It says shocking 1940s videos shows how the U.S. children were sprayed with dangerous pesticides as neighborhoods were gassed with the quote-unquote miracle cure that could kill mosquitoes and end polio. This was what they thought. They actually thought that this was going to stop polio and prevent paralysis, and so they were spreading this DDT miracle cure within neighborhoods. And so here is another video of, and this is even harder to watch, of children that are sitting down eating lunch, getting sprayed. Take a look.
Okay, I have provided the link in the link stack, and included in the article is the full video that Candace only plays a part of. It has no spoken words, no context, and about half of it is the newsreel footage that we just listened to. It does show a lot of people being sprayed with the chemical, but with no context in the audio and no source in the article otherwise. We are left to assume that it is DDT. So who's to say except that the first almost minute of the footage does come from the clip from San Antonio that we previously sourced. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, it's lazy. And that particular video that we just talked about there, that one was being shot around the internet around the time of all of this.
Of course.
Because this story came out, like the anti-vaxxers from Children's Health Defense, which we'll get into later, were pushing it.
Okay.
Yeah, fucking RFK, fucking Junior, fucking fuckwad. All right, here's the next clip.
It's really weird to watch that with the knowledge that we have today. These people were quite literally being poisoned. I mean, you're watching children that are eating lunch. Just imagine them eating lunch and you are having a pesticide that is being sprayed all over you and they're just continuing to eat lunch. You're in the pool, you're having fun, and you are just being completely sprayed with something that down the line you are going to learn is actual poison. Down the streets, people lining up believing this is going to help me. And I also want to make it clear, some of those scenes were from the United States Army that you're seeing, because there was a lot of typhus outbreaks that were happening, and they essentially thought, okay, we can reduce the instances of lice, we can reduce the instances of ticks, we can reduce the instances of fleas that are happening. And this stuff was being also sprayed on crops. It was also being sprayed on animals. So farmers, there were all of these outbreaks that were taking place in the middle of farms of polio. We're going to get to why that's actually relevant. It wasn't just the children, it was also adults, it was soldiers, you saw elderly people in that video, and we are going to see how that actually impacted them. The article confirms that an astonishing 1.34 billion tons of the chemical was sprayed across the United States in the years between 1946 and 1962, and its impact on the environment was significant, making its way into the food supply, and also being reported to cause neurological problems in livestock such as cows, right? So you're talking about this time, and we're looking at those numbers, we're looking at the AMA chart, and we're talking about children that were suddenly having acute symptoms. But what's not mentioned in the story of this history is that animals were also presenting with strange symptoms throughout this time of this quote-unquote polio outbreak.
Yeah, Candace is trying to tie a thread between DDT exposure being blamed for polio symptoms. A major difference here is that polio is entirely borne by people. There are no known cases of people transmitting polio to animals. Included in the link stack is a fact sheet from Montana State University that explains it all pretty well. Further research into this, of course, does show similar symptoms in people that were exposed to DDT and people that definitely had polio. A major difference between the two is that DDT exposure can be recovered from, whereas polio is caused by a virus, and once it takes hold, the symptoms can be anywhere from mild to severe, including death, but severe symptoms are unlikely to ever be recovered from during a lifetime. Candace will continue down this path as she explains a series of advertisements.
Now, I want to show you, you look at those images and you ask yourself, how could people be so fooled into lining up to be sprayed with a pesticide, right? Where does your common sense come online? I don't know. Generally, when I even smell something that's chemically, I'm like, I don't want to be away from it. I kind of try to prevent myself from being able to inhale this. Even if a building is being built, I'll be like, that just smells toxic. Well, what do you think the answer is? Big Pharma, of course. And when I talk about Big Pharma, I talk about whenever there's a government campaign and there are ads that are supposed to make you feel fearful, it is incredible to see people that just completely suspend rational thinking and do exactly what they're told. And since I already showed you the images of them leading up to the vaccine rollout, which took place in 1955, of showing children that were in braces, I also want to show you these images that were telling people that, hey, DDT is going to be so great. You should absolutely use DDT because then you're not going to have any more ticks on you. So let's take a look at some of these ads. Here we have one. It says, it's a woman, looks like she is keeping up the house. It says DDT for control of household pests. And there she is cleaning a cabinet, spraying some of that DDT into her own home. Again, you have that image of another housewife. This year's most powerful fly spray is liquid DDT Kill Coat, the 2-way spray. Oh my God, isn't it just a housewife's dream? She can spray this all across. Then you have this ad for DDT laced wallpaper, which is unbelievable. So quite literally, wallpaper in your home could contain this poisonous compound. It says, protect your children against disease-carrying insects with Trim's DDT children's room wallpaper. I mean, wow. That ad goes on to read, it kills flies, mosquitoes, ants. It reads, medical science knows many common insects breed in filth, live in filth, and carry disease. Science also recognizes the dangers that are present when these disease-carrying insects invade the home. Actual tests have proved that one fly can carry as many as 6.6 million bacteria. Imagine the health hazard, especially to children, from flies seriously suspected of transmitting such diseases as scarlet fever, measles, typhoid, diarrhea, even the dread polio. Some types of mosquitoes carry malaria and yellow fever, and any mosquito bite is painful and easily infected when scratched. So the pitch that you were getting was that the science is in. The science is never wrong, you guys. Trust the science. And if you were trusting the science around this time in the 1940s, it was telling you to put DDT wallpaper in your home because, God forbid, a fly came in. That's what you really want to make sure you didn't get a fly. And the best way to avoid getting a fly is to put up this poisonous wallpaper.
Yeah.
Is there actually poison wallpaper?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. She isn't entirely wrong here.
Okay.
We have to consider some things. For one, these were advertisements being used to sell what was considered a miracle product at the time. DDT had been exceptionally good during the end of World War II in killing lice and other pests in the battlefields in Italy during the last 2 years, from 1943 to 1945. It was good at immediately killing and repelling disease-carrying insects, and polio was thought to be carried by flies and mosquitoes because polio outbreaks tended to happen in warmer weather, particularly in summer months.
Yeah.
So, the thinking was pretty simple on the whole matter. As for the language used in the ads, I'm not excusing it, but they were trying to sell a product that actually didn't sell well in America. It did sell well in Australia.
That makes sense.
In the link stack is an Australian real estate article that explains it better for anyone interested. It seems that a lot of older homes in Australia still had DDT wallpaper up on walls when the article was published.
I just thought of something.
Yeah.
Imagine a house that you could call the House of Death.
Yeah.
You gotta have asbestos tiles for insulation, DDT wallpaper, lead pipes, and quartz floors.
Okay.
A house of death and craziness.
Yeah.
Drives you mad and slowly kills you.
Yeah. Well,
I have a twisted brain.
So there was a huge problem with putting DDT in everything and spraying it everywhere, though. Aside from the obvious bad health effects on human and animal health, insects showed signs of rapid evolution, developing resistance to it. They get more resistant, you use more, it can spiral out of control rapidly. And in the case of the DDT wallpaper was absolutely effective.
Yeah.
But it also managed to stay on a lot of walls. And it was this particular brand that I looked up because that was the advertisement she read from. But it turns out that there were a lot of popular use cases of DDT. But yeah, the wallpaper sold exceptionally well in Australia. I didn't look into why. I didn't look into maybe they were having, maybe that was the only way they could get it in and it was thought as a miracle product. But yeah, it sold exceptionally well there.
From what I understand as well, if the thought process back then was, oh, this is being carried by bugs.
Yeah.
Not only could I see it being this is a miracle product idea, but also just given the amount of fucking bugs Australia deals with on a regular.
Yeah.
I could see somebody wanting to get a lot of somebody's wanting to get the DDT wallpaper just to protect themselves and family members because of the fucking massive amounts of bugs. It'd be like, I could imagine it would sell well down in Florida because of the massive amount of mosquitoes and flies and shit that you have to deal with down there.
Yeah. But yeah, it apparently sold very well in Australia and did its job, but it's in a lot of old houses.
So if I buy anything from the 40s out in Australia, I should probably have somebody come out and make sure I don't
do
got
some
poison.
remediation. Yeah,
okay.
It's a real problem for real estate agents because
I imagine
in a lot of cases too, they don't know that the DDT wallpaper is up because the inheritors of a property might not know.
Ooh, yeah.
So then they go in and they go, oh shit, yeah, the article goes into it better, but yeah, it's quite a problem. So yeah, Candace has a different point now to continue making.
I hate to laugh at this because we're talking about real people who were impacted by this, but it's just, again, so ludicrous when you think about the things that big pharma or trust the science people can tell people, and they just, again, suspend that rational thinking and they just do it, and that's exactly what happened. Here's another ad. It's a woman. She's dancing with a cow. Irresistible. She's dancing with a cow and an apple and a dog and a potato and a chicken, and they all look so happy. I can't resist this ad. Can you? And it says, DDT is good for me with music. Musical notes behind it. So again, that pitch, if you're a responsible housewife, if you care about your children, appealing right to the heart of the matter, going to mothers who are frantically, their husbands are going to come home from work in the 1950s. She's going to be talking about everything that she's seen, everything that she's learned. The children absolutely either A, must get this vaccine as soon as it rolls out, but in the meantime, what can we do to prevent them from getting polio? DDT. What can we do to prevent them from suffering from the symptoms of polio, potentially being paralyzed? DDT. And that's really interesting in the retrospect to consider, because what actually is DDT? Let's actually explore the chemical and its side effects. So what is DDT actually? We've heard the pitch, but obviously people then found out that that pitch was very inaccurate and maybe actually the science wasn't in. Well, what it actually is it falls into a chemical class known as organochlorine pesticide. And yes, it was in fact banned for use and manufacture in the United States. The summary on this one study reads that the most recent National Toxicology Program report on carcinogens lists DDT as, quote, reasonably anticipated to be a human carcinogen. DDT is considered to be a probable human carcinogen by the EPA, associated with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and multiple myelomas. Some studies have detected increased risk of lung cancer in workers exposed to DDT. It goes on to say the effects of DDT in laboratory animals include liver tumors, lung tumors, leukemia, adrenal toxicity, tumors, cellular effects of the adrenal cortex and medulla, thyroid toxicity, decreased capacity to concentrate iodide, kidney toxicity, and immune system toxicity. Here's where it gets really important. Neurotoxic effects of DDT include tremors, convulsion, paralysis, decreased central nervous system lipid. Okay, that's really interesting. So it states that exposure to DDT when you become poisoned by it can cause paralysis. And that's quite shocking, right? So we want to look it up. We want to make sure that we can confirm this across government sites, of course, because you should always trust the government to tell you the truth, even when the government is telling you to put up wallpaper that has a poisonous compound in it. Just know that they're doing it because they care about you.
Yeah, the government did not tell anyone to put up DDT wallpaper. In my research, no single government entity told anyone to put up DDT-laced wallpaper or other products, and because of items like DDT wallpaper and raw milk, we wound up having to establish agencies like the FDA to protect consumers. The effects of DDT that were listed are absolutely real, but you see how she undermines the very argument she is making by reading from them and then blaming basically corporate bullshit and free market capitalism crap on the government, which had to fight companies to regulate shit like DDT wallpaper out of existence. What the fuck? Like, she's making her own argument for regulation. Like, because, a company, hell, today, they will still sit there and go, they will tell you that their science proves whatever, and it's like, but fortunately they have to, like, list all the fucking insert side effects. Yeah. Like, which, makes a lot of these drugs and stuff, even vaccines sound horrifying. Yeah. But, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, look, before I get the next vaccine in my life, I'm going to go look it up. Yeah. I'm going to try to find which version has the least incidence rate, if I can, before I take a thing, But, yeah. Any rate, next clip.
Well, we found this. It looks quite old, but it's on the CDC website, and it is essentially the CDC admitting at that time that DDT poisoning did in fact cause paralysis. Take a look at a clinical case report that they did. It says human poisoning by DDT has been reported to have occurred only through ingestion. Okay. Well, that seems like that could have definitely been something that occurred in the 1940s throughout that decade, considering they were spraying the chickens, they were spraying the cows, they were spraying the apples, next to the dancing housewife who was spraying everything in her home because, God forbid, there was a fly on the cow. Okay? So, yes, that becomes relevant and definitely feasible that children and adults were ingesting DDT throughout this period. It goes on to say the earliest symptom of poisoning is hyperesthesia of the mouth and the lower part of the face. Hyperesthesia, just to be clear, is a neurological condition that causes a person extreme sensitivity to touch, pain, pressure, and thermal sensations. So it again is it's a neurotoxic effect. This is followed by paresthesia and tremor of the extremities, confusion, malaise, headache, fatigue, and delayed vomiting. Paresthesia is a burning or prickling sensation that is usually felt in the hands, arms, the legs, or the feet, but can also occur in other parts of the body. Onset may be as soon as 30 minutes after ingestion of a large dose or as late as 6 hours after smaller but still toxic doses. Recovery from mild poisoning is essentially complete in 24 hours. A recovery from severe poisoning may require several days. In 2 instances, there was some residual weakness and ataxia of the hands 5 weeks after ingestion. Now, if you scroll down a little further to page 118 in this study, it says, other neurologic effects of DDT poisoning have been reported. Freeman, 1975, is the study that they are referring to, stated that prolonged exposure resulted in neurologic dysfunction. Others have reported clinical manifestations, including polyneuropathy, paresthesias, tremors, and convulsions. Peripheral neuropathy has been occasionally ascribed to DDT, usually as a result of occupational exposure. One syndrome consists of numbness and paresthesias, hypotonia, and asymmetric weakness or paralysis, with a slow, spontaneous recovery when exposure is terminated. Now, that is really interesting. Again, we're going to connect with studies so that you can continue to read it. And it has a table that summarizes all of these results.
Okay, before she goes on, it took some digging, but I found the report that she is talking about. It was produced in September of 1978, and of course it is in the link stack as a PDF. The part she was reading from is on page 117. So, as we know about Candace, she herself has said before that a lie of omission is still a lie, and just, wow, does she ever lie right here. The report she cites goes on to say a lot more about DDT and exposure, and I'm going to read a lot of it right now, but I encourage anyone with the time or interest to read the report I am linking. We are starting on page 117, and I'm going to read quite a bit of it starting at the top. Clinical and case reports. Human poisoning by DDT has been reported to have occurred only through ingestion. The earliest symptom of poisoning is hyperesthesia of the mouth and lower part of the face. This is an abnormal increase in sensitivity to stimulation of the senses, commonly affecting touch but potentially affecting all senses. This is followed by paresthesia, which is the abnormal sensation referred to most often as pins and needles, and tremor of the extremities, confusion, malaise, headache, fatigue, and delayed vomiting. The vomiting is probably of CNS origin and not due to local irritation. Convulsions occur only in severe poisoning. Hayes, 1959, 1975, WHO, 1977. Onset may be as soon as 30 minutes after ingestion of a large dose or as late as 6 hours after smaller but still toxic doses of DDT. Recovery from mild poisoning is essentially complete in 24 hours, but recovery from severe poisoning may require several days. In 2 instances, there was some residual weakness and ataxia, clumsy or unsteady movements, of the hands 5 weeks after ingestion. The human acute oral LD has been estimated at about 250 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. Table 213 gives a summary of information on human responses to various doses of DDT. A few persons apparently have been killed by uncomplicated, which is poisoning that does not complicate major organs in some way. A few persons apparently have been killed by uncomplicated DDT poisoning, but none of these cases has been reported in detail. Death has been caused much more frequently by the ingestion of solutions of DDT, but in most instances the signs and symptoms were predominantly or exclusively those of poisoning by the solvent, noted in Hayes' 1959 report. This does not mean that the toxicity of the solvent always predominates. For example, the recurrent convulsions in a case reported by Cunningham and Hill in 1952, though more characteristic of poisoning by one of the cyclodine insecticides, was certainly not typical of solvent poisoning. A 2-year-old child drank an unknown quantity of fly spray containing 5% DDT, but the nature of other active ingredients or the solvent was unknown. About 1 hour after drinking the material, the child became unconscious and had a generalized sustained convulsion. Convulsions were present when the child was hospitalized 2 hours after taking the poison, but the convulsions were controlled by barbiturates and other sedatives. Convulsions recurred on the 4th day and again on the 21st day, but were stopped each time by treatment with sedatives. On the 12th day, it was noted that the patient was deaf. Hearing began to improve about the 24th day and was normal, as were other neurologic and psychologic findings when the patient was examined about 2.5 months after the accident.
Jesus.
Noted in Cunningham and Hill's report in 1952. Other neurologic effects of DDT poisoning have been reported. Freeman, in 1975, stated that prolonged exposure resulted in neurologic dysfunction. Others have reported clinical manifestations, including polyneuropathy, paresthesias, tremors, and convulsions. Campbell, 1946, Isaiah, 1954. Peripheral neuropathy has been occasionally ascribed to DDT, usually as a result of occupational exposure. One syndrome consists of numbness and paresthesias, hypotonia, and asymmetric weakness or paralysis, with a slow, spontaneous recovery when exposure is terminated. Noted in Jenkins and Toole, 1964, McCarris and West, 1946, Onifer and Wisnant, 1957. The signs of intoxication in a 10-year-old girl who died after exposure to DDT were reported by Jacob Zinger and Rabin, 1963. They included red blotches on the skin, hands, and arms, petechae, hemorrhagic bullae around the lips, cellulitis, lymphangitis, lymphadenitis, nosebleed, hematuria, and uncontrollable fever. Primary skin irritation is rarely, if ever, due to DDT, and allergic dermatitis has been reported only infrequently, in Higgins and Kendall, 1949. Purpura with marked thrombocytopenia has occurred in exposed children in Karpinski, 1950. An isolated case of agranulocytosis in Wright's report, 1946, and postmortem findings resembling peritoritis nodosa in Hill and Damani, 1946, suggest more serious allergic manifestations. Sanchez-Medal et al. 1963 presented circumstantial evidence that implicated DDT as a cause of aplastic anemia and thrombocytopenia. However, the association of these conditions with BHC and other chlorinated hydrocarbons is on firmer ground. From USDH HEUW, 1969. Causes of accidental and suicidal poisoning, in which the effects were clearly caused by DDT, are summarized in Table 311 and 32. Volunteer studies. A number of small-scale studies involving controlled exposure of volunteers to technical DDT were conducted in the 1940s. Noted in Hayes, 1959, USDHU, 1969, and WHO, 1977. Table 321 summarizes the reported results of controlled oral exposures. This is fucked up. What I'm about to read is fucked up.
40s were a wild time.
Wait for it. 2 chronic exposure studies with penitentiary volunteers given DDT orally by capsule have been reported.
Oh.
By Hayes et al. 1956 and 1971. The first study involved 51 men. Of these 51 men, 3 completed 1 year of dosage at 3.5 milligrams per man per day, and 7 completed 1 year at 35 milligrams per man per day. So one group got 3.5 milligrams, the other group got literally 10 times that.
Jesus Christ.
Prisoners. Penitentiary inmates. Table 311. Summary of the effects of the accidental or suicidal ingestion of DDT. One man, let me read through here. Individual dose, formulation, and number of persons effects of 300 to 4,500 microgram or milligrams in food. One man, onset in 1 hour, vomiting, restlessness, headache, heart weak and slow, recovery next day. Another one, unknown dose in tarts, 25 men, 5,000 to 6,000 milligrams.
Was there just some motherfucker off to the side? Like, I wonder how many things I could put DDT into. Hey, can I get, I know this might be morally questionable, but can I get some of the worst people from a penitentiary? For science, of course. I definitely don't want to try and poison the boss next week and get the day off.
The unknown dose was in tarts for 25 men. Next up, 5,000 to 6,000 milligrams in pancakes. 3 men.
Why the pancakes, though?
Next, up to 20,000 milligrams inbred, fed to 28 men.
What the fuck?
Onset in 2.5 hours for the tarts. All weak and giddy, 4 vomited, 2 hospitalized, 1 confused, incoordinated weak, 1 with palpitations and numbness of hands. Recovery in 24 to 48 hours. Then onset in 2 to 3 hours for the next group, throbbing headache, dizziness, incoordination, paresthesias of extremities, which is the pins and needles we talked about, urge to defecate, wide, non-reacting pupils, reduced vision, dysarthria, facial weakness, tremor, ataxic gait, reduced sensitivity to touch, reduced reflexes, positive Romberg, I don't know what that is, slightly low blood pressure, and persistent irregular heart action. Partial recovery in 2 to 3 days, but slight jaundice appeared 4 to 5 days after ingestion and lasted 3 to 4 days. All normal 19 days after poisoning, except irregular heart action in 1. Onset in 30 to 60 minutes in those most severely affected. Men first seen 2 to 3 hours after ingestion. In spite of severe early vomiting that reduced the effective dose, severity of illness and especially intensity of numbness and paralysis of extremities proportional to the amount of DDT ingested. Recovery in all but 8 men in 48 hours. 5 others fully recovered in 2 weeks, but some had weakness and ataxia of the hands in 3 to 5 weeks after ingestion. So, yeah. 311 continued. Summary of the effects of the accidental or suicidal ingestion of DDT. Yeah, we're not done. Individual dose, formulation, number of persons affected, unknown dose, in flour, about 100 women. Onset, about 3.5 hours after ingestion. Total of 85 cases, of which 37 were hospitalized. Symptoms mild and similar to those in earlier outbreaks, except gastrointestinal disturbance in most severe cases, included abdominal pain and diarrhea, as well as nausea. Most fully recovered in 24 hours. Next up, unknown dose, 14 cases. Symptoms in established cases similar to those reported earlier. From a wide range of dose of 286 to 1,716 milligrams in meatballs.
I reiterate my point. Who was the crazy fuck that was doing the experiment that he was just like, I wonder how much, what I could... I bet my grandmother's muffin recipe would just be absolutely amazing with a little DDT in it.
Oh, I know, right?
Is this how my uncle managed to get those meatballs? Just that particular level of spicy?
8 cases, 11 exposed. Unknown dose. 1 case, except in 1 man who was already sick when he received a dosage of 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. No poisoning at dosages of 5.1 to 10.3 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. Doses calculated from known consumption of meatballs and estimated concentration of DDT in the mixture. Symptoms: excessive perspiration, nausea, vomiting, convulsions, headache, increased salivation, tremors, tachycardia, and cyanosis of the lips after ingestion of 16.3 to 120.5 milligrams per kilogram. Onset in 2 to 6 hours, depending on dosage, as much as 2 days for recovery. Death, 13 hours after suicidal ingestion. Unknown dose, 22 unrelated cases. 22 separate cases, including 15 attempted suicides, some complicated by solvents, 3 deaths. Adapted from WHO 1977, Hayes 1959, Committee on Pesticides 1951, USDHU 1969. Table 321, summary of the effects of 1 or a few oral doses of DDT on volunteers. Dose in milligrams formulation result reference of 1,500 butter solution. No effect, but lice killed when fed 6 and 12 hours after dose. They put DDT into butter and then
wait.
fed it to lice.
Okay, I thought they put DDT in butter, made some more fucking DDT pancakes, served those to some inmates, and then all of their lice
those
died.
were all those were all the pancakes and the meatballs and stuff were all intentional poisonings.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. See, I thought it was just some crazy government scientist sitting there going, "I wonder what I could put this into,"
No,
because you know
that-
I'm not allowed to work in the gas department anymore. So I guess I'm going to have to figure out how else to poison people.
Yeah, Operation Paperclip bullshit, yeah. Oh my god. Okay, so 500 in an oil solution, no effect. 700, and I'm not sure what that one was. 250 suspension, none, except slight disturbance of sensitivity of mouth. 250 oil solution, variable hyperesthesia of the mouth. 750 disturbance of sensitivity of lower part of face, uncertain gait. Peak reaction 6 hours after ingestion, characterized by malaise, cold moist skin, and hypersensitivity to contact. Reflex is normal. 1000, same as above, no joint pain, fatigue, fear, or difficulty in seeing or hearing. 1500, pricking of tongue and around mouth and nose beginning. 2.5 hours after dose, 1500 milligrams. 2.5 hours after dose. Disturbance of equilibrium, dizziness, confusion, tremor of extremities, peak reaction 10 hours after ingestion. Characterized by great malaise, headache, and fatigue, delayed vomiting. Almost complete recovery in 24 hours. The latter dosage was about 200 times the average daily rate of dietary exposure in the general population of the time. The second study involved 24 men whose exposure to DDT lasted 21 and a half months.
Jesus. 4
men were controls, and daily oral doses of technical DDT were given at 3.5 milligrams per man to 6 men and at 35 milligrams per man to 6 others. Another 8 men received DDT at 35 milligrams per man per day. 20 exposed men were kept under observation until 4 years after the beginning of the study, and 16 of these completed an additional year of observation. No volunteer in either study complained of any symptom or showed any sign of illness in the tests used that did not have recognizable cause unrelated to the exposure of DDT. At intervals, the men were given a systems review, physical examination, and a variety of laboratory tests. Particular attention was given to the neurologic examination and liver function tests. No adverse changes were detected, although 2 men were removed from the 1956 study because of illness. One had contracted hepatitis, and the other suffered a myocardial infarction. However, their illnesses were not considered to be caused by exposure to DDT. In another study, which was reported by Morgan and Roan in 1971, 4 volunteers were given oral doses of technical DDT at 10 or 20 milligrams per day, and DDE at 5 milligrams per day, DDD at 5 milligrams per day for 81 to 183 days. A battery of hematologic and clinical biochemical tests were conducted before, during, and after exposure. No abnormalities were detected in the 4 volunteers. 3.3 Studies of occupationally exposed workers. 3 studies have been reported of workers with prolonged heavy exposure to DDT. Orderly from 1958, that's ORTELEE. Wild, because I pronounced it as orderly, like a hospital person.
Yeah, that's honestly what I.
But that's what I
was,
see
yeah.
when I see the word. I see orderly. So orderly. 1958 carried out clinical and laboratory examinations of 40 workers, all of whom were exposed to DDT and some of whom were exposed to a number of other pesticides. The men had been employed at this work for up to 8 years, with heavy exposure in some cases for up to 6.5 years. Exposure was so intense that during working hours, many of the men were coated with a heavy layer of DDT dust. By comparing their excretion of DDA with that of volunteers given known doses of DDT, it was possible to estimate that the average amounts of DDT absorbed by 3 groups of the workers with different degrees of occupational exposure were 14, 30, and 42 milligrams per man per day, with the exception of the excretion of DDA and the occurrence of a few cases of minor irritation of the skin and eyes, no correlation was found between any abnormality and exposure to the insecticide. Special attention was given to a complete neurologic examination and to laboratory tests for liver function. Although a few abnormalities, such as hypertension and hearing loss, were revealed, the author considered them unrelated to DDT exposure. One worker with a previous history of malaria had a palpably enlarged liver, 3 had hyperactive deep tendon reflexes, and 5 had slight tremors of the outstretched hand at rest. Laws 1967 studied 35 men employed for 11 to 19 years in a plant that produced DDT continuously and exclusively since 1947, so 20 years, and at the time of the study produced 2,722 metric tons per month.
Jesus.
Findings from medical histories, physical examinations, routine clinical laboratory tests, and chest x-rays revealed no ill effects attributable to exposure to DDT. Storage levels of DDT and metabolites in the men's fat ranged from 38 to 647 parts per million, plus an average of 8 parts per million for the general population, or versus an average of 8 parts per million for the general population. Based on their storage of DDT in fat and excretion of DDA in urine, the average daily intake of DDT by the 20 men with high occupational exposure was estimated to be 17.5 to 18 milligrams per man. Rebello in 1975 studied lymphocytes from 42 workers who worked in direct contact with DDT in 3 insecticide plants. The frequency of chromatid aberrations was not significantly higher than that in controls from the same plants but not in direct contact with DDT. However, there was evidence that one of the control groups had high exposure to DDT, as evidenced by high residual levels in plasma. When this group was included with the directly exposed workers, there was a significant increase in chromatid aberrations in the exposed workers compared to the control groups. The frequency of chromatid aberrations was 12% in exposed workers, 8.8% in workers from the same plants not directly exposed to DDT, and 2.2% in a control group from the general population. The corresponding concentrations of DDT and metabolites in blood plasma were 0.933 parts per million, 0.275 parts per million, and 0.03 parts per million, respectively. The authors suggested that exposure to DDT may cause chromatid lesions. A number of other studies of occupationally exposed workers have been published, although in most cases no quantitative measures of exposure are available, and the workers were exposed to other pesticides in addition to DDT. Studies by several investigators, Long in 69, Morgan and Roan in 69, 73, and 74, Warnick and Carter in 72, Sandifer in 72, and Embry in 72. Studies by those several investigators have failed to reveal effects of clinical significance in workers with prolonged moderate exposure to a wide variety of pesticides. The possibility of adaptive changes other than enzyme induction has been suggested. Tochi in 1969. But the World Health Organization has dismissed these effects as unproven. WHO 1977. Other reports give some evidence of toxic effects. The reports under discussion tend to fall into 2 sets, those involving general debility and those involving a single organ or system. Reported conditions representative of general debility include dermatitis, subtle blood changes, general weakness, palpitations, functional angiospasm, headache, dizziness, inappetence, vomiting, lower abdominal pain, chronic gastritis, benign chronic hepatitis, insomnia, a sympathetic vascular asthenic syndrome, vegetative dystonia, and confusion. Reported by Kostyuk and Mukhtarova in 1970, Bezgulgi 1973. I would assume from those names that came from the Soviets. The largest number of heavily exposed workers whose health has been investigated are those associated with malaria control in Brazil and India, from WHO 1973, In Brazil, periodic clinical examinations were made of 202 spray men exposed to DDT for 6 or more years.
Fucking hell.
77 spray men exposed for 13 years ending in 1959, and 406 controls from the general population. In the first examination, carried out in 1971, differences between exposed and unexposed groups were observed in some neurologic tests, but this result was not confirmed by the second examination in the same year or in subsequent examinations. During 3 years, a survey of illnesses requiring medical care during the 6 months preceding each periodic medical examination failed to demonstrate any difference between exposed and control groups. A relatively small number of analyses indicated that the concentration of DDT in the blood of spraymen was about 3 times that of controls. In India, the blood levels of 144 spraymen were 7.5 to 15 times those of control groups, and were at least as high as those reported for workers who make and formulate DDT elsewhere. When the spraymen were examined, the following differences from controls were found. Knee reflexes were brisker, slight tremor was often more present, and a timed Romberg test was more poorly performed by the spraymen. These apparently positive results led to the selection of 20 men for examination by a neurologist, who concluded that either the differences found initially were not real, or that the men's conditions had returned to normal in the few months between the 2 examinations. The signs were apparently not dose-related, since they showed no correlation with serum levels of DDT. WHO Report 1973. Persons have been reported to experience headache, dizziness, nausea, vomiting, pain and numbness of the limbs, and general weakness beginning 1 to 1.5 hours after entering a field treated with DDT, from Kolyakoda and Mikhail Chakhanova in 1973. This has been attributed to possible food poisoning or hysteria, from the WHO 1977. A small number of workers experienced mild narcotic effects, such as vertigo and nausea, when working in confined spaces with DDT, in the Hayes Report 1959. Gill and Murin, 1949, reported that some persons suffered temporary irritability, fatigue, and other ill-defined symptoms after exposure in the dusty atmosphere of a delousing station, but the relation of these findings to DDT was not clear. The relationships of these reported symptoms to DDT, to solvents or carriers, or to both, are not clear from the circumstances of the reports. Effects on reproduction have also been reported. One study of the course of labor and puerperium in 390 vineyard workers exposed to DDT, sulfur, methylparathion, and copper sulfate reported a higher frequency of miscarriage, toxicosis, and asthenia in women exposed to these pesticides than in women not so exposed. Histologic changes in placentas, CNS disturbances, and low birth weight in their children were also reported. In Nicotina, 1974. The middle concentration of DDT and metabolites in the exposed women were 0.12 parts per million in milk and 0.19 parts per million in placentas, which was 4.8 to 5.4 times those of controls. Peck in 1970 suggested that the interference with the synthesis of steroid hormones by DDT and other insecticides might be a cause of impotence reported in farm workers. Some cardiovascular effects have been reported. In a study of workers occupationally exposed to a combination of organochlorine and organophosphorus pesticides, the incidence of myocardial dystrophy was 56% versus 9% in a control group, and abnormalities in EKGs and vascular effects were noted together with elevated levels of cholesterol and beta-lipoproteins in the blood and decreased phospholipid levels in the Bezgulgi and Gorskaya 1976 report. Carlson and Colmeden-Hedman 1977 reported that 8 men were exposed for 6 hours to a number of chlorinated pesticides, mainly lindane but including DDT, showed a fall in alpha lipoprotein levels after their exposure had ceased. Coleman and Hedman, 1973, had previously reported that these same workers had hyper-high-density alpha-lipoproteinemia. Several investigators have reported toxic effects on the liver associated with exposure to DDT or other pesticides. Chronic liver damage, such as cirrhosis and chronic hepatitis, has been reported on the basis of liver biopsies from 8 workers heavily exposed to BHC, DDT, or both for periods ranging from 5 to 13 years. Other factors, such as alcoholism, were reportedly excluded as the cause of the liver cirrhosis.
Damn.
From a report from Schuttman, 1968.
Wait.
Yeah.
I can only imagine any of those workers going back after getting back from the doctors and going, all right, so here's what the doctor said. My drinking's of beer is not a bad thing. I was exposed to DDT.
My alcoholism had nothing to do with my cirrhosis or my yellow skin tones. Yeah. Bisgilgi in 1976 reported a case of chronic toxic hepatitis progressing to liver cirrhosis in a pest control worker with 24 years of exposure to DDT, BHC, trichlorphon, ronal, zinc phosphide, warfarin, and difecinone. Elevated levels of C-reactive protein were found in workers with chronic exposure to organochlorine pesticides. Takahashi, 76. Morgan and Roan, 74, were unable to find significant correlation between worker exposure to DDT, as determined by serum concentrations of DDT and DDE, and urinary glyceric acid excretion, a measure of microsomal enzyme activity. However, they found a small but significant increase in serum lactic dehydrogenase, LDH, activity, and a more substantial and significant decrease in serum creatinine phosphokinase, CPK, in workers with higher levels of DDT and DDE in their serum, which is reflected on Table 331. Levels of other enzymes were unchanged. Increased liver microsomal enzyme activity, as reflected by decreased plasma half-life of phenylbutazone, was found in 14 workers exposed to DDT and lindane. However, the workers' exposure to lindane was the only one that was clearly significant, as indicated by its concentration in plasma, in the Coleman and Hedman 1973 report. In a previous study, Coleman 1969, workers exposed to DDT and lindane metabolized the drug antipyrine more rapidly than unexposed persons, a phenomenon which was also attributed to induction of liver microsomal enzymes. Poland, 1970, studied a group of workers in a DDT manufacturing plant. They found that the half-life of the drug, phenylbutazone, in the blood plasma of the workers was significantly reduced below that in unexposed controls. They also found that excretion of 6-beta-hydroxycortisol in urine was increased by 57% relative to that in controls. Both effects were considered to result from a DDT-induced increase in the activity of microsomal enzymes. The average level of DDT in the blood of the exposed workers was 0.573 parts per million, corresponding to an average daily intake of about 18 milligrams per man per day. Electroencephalograms were obtained from 3 workers exposed to DDT, BHC, and benzolan for periods ranging from 7 months to 20 years. Just over 78% of the records were normal, and 29.9% were abnormal. 21.9% were abnormal. The most severe changes were in persons exposed to the 3 compounds for 1 to 2 years. Less severe changes were seen with either shorter or longer exposure. The changes were not correlated with age. Some of the EEG records showed bitemporal sharp waves with shifting lateralization combined with low voltage theta activity. Other records showed spike complexes, paroxysmal discharges composed of slow and sharp waves, most pronounced anteriorly, and low voltage rhythmic spikes posteriorly. None of the persons examined showed abnormal clinical neurologic findings. Israeli and Meyersdorf, 1973, Meyersdorf and Israeli, 1974. Extensive experience and numerous medical studies of groups of workers have been reviewed, in highest 1959, with the finding that dermatitis was common in men who used DDT solutions. The rashes were apparently due primarily to the solvent, especially kerosene. As often happens with rashes caused by petroleum distillates, they were most severe in men when they first started work and cleared in a few days unless contamination was exceptionally severe. Orderly, 1958, also reported eye and skin irritations in his study of 40 workers with intense exposure to DDT. I know that was long. I'm not apologizing because it establishes that this shit can be gotten over rapidly.
Yeah.
This is the entirety of the section that she read from, with me skipping another table of formula material near the end. The next section, which I will not read from to spare all of you the time, talks about how difficult it is to study the effects of DDT in the general population because of how widespread the use of it was, but notes that DDT resides in fat cells, so it was possible to measure its lifespan and some effects in exposed people, while noting that normal people were exposed to it differently than the workers that handled it in industrial capacity, and obviously different than the prisoners that were fed it intentionally. The whole report, which compiles several others, is a fascinating read if you have the time. But the key takeaway from it for me is that it often took a lot of direct DDT exposure for people to suffer effects of DDT poisoning, and even then, in most cases, they could get better and back to general health in a short amount of time in even the worst cases. Some people used it as a suicide device, and they succeeded. But overall, unintentional or workplace exposure did not result in the amount of death or deleterious effects like whole body paralysis that people like Candace would have us believe, which makes her equating DDT exposure to polio all the more fucking absurd. But we are here to break down her bullshit, so it is time for her to continue.
What's interesting about the idea that it was causing paralysis if it was prolonged exposure, and also this recovery that could take place, it could in fact have been a temporary paralysis, is that tons of the polio cases that were being attributed throughout the 1940s and the 1950s, when they were quite literally inserting children inside of an eye or lung, were temporary paralysis, right? You had kids that were temporarily paralyzed. And before the rollout of the vaccine, the diagnostic definition of polio were all cases of paralysis, right? So it didn't matter what was going on. If you were showing symptoms of paralysis, even if the paralysis then resolved itself in a couple of weeks, you were diagnosed with paralysis.
Polio.
They then changed, the AMA, the American Medical Association, changed the diagnostic definition of polio following 1954. In 1954, they changed diagnostic definition, and they suddenly reduced what they would include. Suddenly they were saying, okay, not every sign of paralysis means that it's polio. And this is really crucial to understanding how they got suddenly the numbers of polio to decrease so quickly. They began recategorizing it. Suddenly Guillain-Barré syndrome, they were saying, okay, that actually isn't polio. This might actually be Guillain-Barré syndrome. They reclassified polio into other categories. That significant change in the diagnostic definition done in 1954 is why you see a steep drop after the miraculous rollout of the vaccine in 1955.
Okay, this is not entirely true or false, but the way she is presenting it is false. Candace is going to go on with her assertion that DDT was to blame for polio cases, but let's address this right now. So before the development of the polio vaccine by Jonas Salk, polio cases were diagnosed based on the observation of paralysis twice, at least 24 hours apart. That comes from the following long passage that I am about to read from the National Vaccine Information Center on the history of the polio vaccine in America. The link is provided in the link stack, of course. Quoting from the article, the first use of a poliovirus vaccine in the United States occurred in 1934, prior to the discovery that there were 3 poliovirus types, type 1, 2, and 3. This unlicensed experimental vaccine contained a poliovirus obtained from the nerve tissue of an infected monkey, which was then ground up and mixed with formalin, a formaldehyde agent, in an attempt to inactivate the poliovirus without impairing its ability to stimulate antibody production.
Oi.
Oh, it's going to get wild.
Oi.
William Park and Maurice Brody, the two researchers responsible for the experimental poliovirus vaccine, published their findings in the Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA, in 1935, and after vaccinating a dozen children, reported that their vaccine appeared to be safe. Following publication of their findings, health officials experiencing polio outbreaks requested that this vaccine be tested on a larger number of individuals. While some individuals involved in the vaccine trials reported the experimental poliovirus vaccine to be effective at preventing polio, others blamed cases of polio on the vaccine itself. The vaccine trials were poorly run, and no accurate information could be gathered to determine the vaccine's effectiveness. At the same time as Park and Brody were conducting clinical trials on their inactivated poliovirus vaccine, John Culmer, a pathologist from Philadelphia, began testing his live virus vaccine. This experimental vaccine was reportedly weakened with chemicals that included two highly toxic mercury-containing compounds, mercurofene and merthiolate. After testing the live virus vaccine on a few monkeys, Culmer vaccinated himself, his two sons, and 23 additional children before expanding its use to include over 10,000 individuals.
What the fuck?
9 people who received his vaccine died and dozens were paralyzed. In the late 1940s, research aimed at determining how many poliovirus types were circulating in the environment began. By 1949, a team led by Dr. David Bodian reported that at least 3 distinct poliovirus types existed. The researchers continued to study polio strains by collecting samples of throat cultures, stool, and even nerve tissue from persons who developed or died of polio. Between 1949 and 1951, more than $1.2 million was spent on poliovirus typing, with most of the money used to purchase and transport monkeys for experimental purposes. Poliovirus researchers used monkeys for polio research, and during the typing experiments, stool samples from persons who had developed polio were injected into the brains of the monkeys. These monkeys were monitored for symptoms of polio, and when these occurred, they were killed so that their poliovirus-infected spinal cords and brain tissues could be collected. Over 17,000 monkeys were killed between 1949 and 1951, but no additional poliovirus types were isolated. Researchers had already concluded that the poliovirus could be grown in the nervous tissue of monkeys, but were aware that they could not use this tissue to develop a vaccine, because monkey nervous tissue was known to cause an inflammation of the spinal cord and brain in humans, known as encephalomyelitis. In 1949, however, a team of researchers from the Children's Hospital of Boston, led by microbiologist John Enders, discovered that the polio virus could also be grown in kidney, skin, and muscle tissue, and in a test tube instead of the spinal cord or brain of a monkey. Good for the monkeys.
God damn. I kind of feel bad for the monkeys.
There's so much more.
Oh, God.
Once it was determined that only 3 poliovirus types existed, and that cultures could be grown in a test tube in other tissues besides monkey nervous tissues, work on a killed virus vaccine began. At this time, however, research on a live attenuated poliovirus vaccine was already underway, led by Dr. Hilary Kaprowski, a scientist with Lederal Pharmaceuticals. In 1950, Kaprowski tested his vaccine on institutionalized children residing at New York's Letchworth Village without permission from New York state officials. Kaprowski reported that children involved in the secretive trial developed antibodies against type 2 poliovirus without experiencing paralysis. His experiment was, however, criticized by fellow researchers who questioned the ethics of experimenting on institutionalized children.
Well, at least somebody was having a mind about themselves in that whole process.
Yeah. And we get on to Salk's inactivated poliovirus vaccine. Yeah, that's pretty fucked up, right? There's more. By 1950, University of Pittsburgh poliovirus researcher Dr. Jonas Salk excuse me, had begun working on a killed poliovirus vaccine derived from monkey kidney cells seeded with live poliovirus. Researchers working with Salk had found monkey kidneys to be ideal for developing cell cultures, and that one monkey kidney could produce several thousand poliovirus vaccine doses.
So we're back to killing monkeys
Oh,
again. Okay.
The killed poliovirus vaccine would contain all 3 poliovirus types, selected from strains isolated in the samples submitted to laboratories from poliovirus patients. Salk selected type 1 from the Mahoney strain, isolated in 1941 and responsible for over 80% of all cases of paralytic polio. Type 2 from the Middle East Forces strain, isolated from the spinal tissue of a British soldier who died from polio in Egypt in 1943. And type 3 from the Sauket strain, isolated by Salk himself from the stool of a child with polio.
I mean, at least 2 of those were decently sourced. I mean, I guess the soldier was already dead, but
I mean, give your body up for science, you limey bastard. The selected strains were then inactivated by a process that used formaldehyde in a 250 to 1 ratio at a temperature of 1 degree Celsius. So just above freezing.
Just above freezing.
This process was required to be perfect to ensure that the poliovirus could produce an immune response but be incapable of causing paralytic polio. Early testing of Salk's killed poliovirus vaccine began in 1952 at 2 different institutions in Pennsylvania. The D.T. Watson Home for Crippled Children and the Polk School for the Retarded and Feeble-Minded. Hell of a name. The Watson Home, a stately facility for persons recovering from paralytic polio, was considered one of the best rehabilitation centers, and patients administered Salk's experimental vaccine were considered at low risk due to previous exposure to polio. With this experiment, Salk tested each patient to determine what poliovirus type had likely caused the paralysis and then injected them with an experimental vaccine containing only that particular strain. This experiment was done to see whether his vaccine could raise antibody levels even higher than what was previously found and whether they would remain elevated for an extended period. The Polk School, however, housed individuals with intellectual disabilities and was considered a depressing institution that was poorly staffed and overcrowded. While some residents had measurable antibody to at least one type of poliovirus, others did not, and this put them at high risk for developing polio from an incorrectly inactivated experimental vaccine. Salk continued to change his vaccine formulation during the vaccine trial process. Some formulations contained mineral oil, while others did not. He tried a single-type poliovirus vaccine on some residents and gave others a vaccine containing all 3 types. He even experimented with the process by which the poliovirus was inactivated. Salk reported that his killed vaccine was safe for human use and capable of producing an antibody response to all 3 poliovirus types that persisted for several months. Coincidentally, the worst poliovirus year in history also occurred in 1952, with over 57,000 reported cases in the United States and 3,000 deaths among them. Some attributed the rise in reported cases to improved public health reporting systems and more accurate physician diagnosis of polio, while others believed the rise in population simply increased the number of potentially susceptible individuals. Some people even suggested that DDT and other poisonous chemicals in widespread use might be causing an increase in polio.
So that's where it started.
Yeah. In March of 1954, Salk appeared on the cover of Time magazine, and an article accompanied his photo, which reported on the success of the small vaccine trials. His findings had not yet been published in any medical journal, and Salk reported that his vaccine would not be available for the public before the next polio season. Preparations for a large-scale vaccine trial that would begin in the early part of the spring in 1954 began after the publicity Salk received in Time magazine. The Vaccine Advisory Committee, the committee charged with overseeing the trials, wanted a double-blind placebo study to ensure that the vaccine was indeed safe and effective. Salk, on the other hand, initially refused to agree to this condition, as he felt that he would not be able to live with himself if a child who received the placebo contracted polio and it could have been prevented by his vaccine. Salk eventually agreed to have a control group as part of the field trial after his former mentor, Thomas Francis, was selected to evaluate the trial's results. Conant Laboratories in Toronto cultivated the live polio virus for use in the vaccines and shipped them to Park Davis Pharmaceuticals in Detroit for vaccine production. Vaccine manufacturing problems occurred immediately and were blamed on the complex process involved to ensure that the polio virus was inactivated. Additionally, Salk was still refining his vaccine product even though it was supposed to be in the manufacturing stages for use in the vaccine field trial slated to begin in 1954. By the fall of 1953, after several failed attempts by Park Davis to consistently duplicate Salk's vaccine, additional pharmaceutical companies were approached to assist in vaccine development, including Cutter Laboratories, Eli Lilly, Wyeth, and Sharp and Dome. Stricter quality controls were also established and would require each batch of poliovirus vaccine be triple tested by the pharmaceutical company, by Salk's lab, and by the Public Health Service to ensure that the vaccine was safe and effective for use. Questions about the safety of Salk's vaccine began to surface by both the media and by other scientists. Oral poliovirus vaccine developer Dr. Albert Sabin, who was actively working on a rival vaccine, voiced concerns about the size of the study population, the poliovirus type 1 strain selected for use in the vaccine, and the speed at which the vaccine had gone from being an experiment in a lab to one expected to be injected into hundreds of thousands of children. Further, the media was told that certain vaccine batches were found to contain live poliovirus. Due to the negative publicity, an additional safeguard was initiated that would require the vaccine manufacturer to produce 11 consecutive vaccine lots free of live poliovirus prior to allowing the use of one lot by the public. Salk was also required to complete a smaller field test involving 5,000 children to ensure that the vaccine was safe prior to starting the mass vaccination trial. Salk reported his smaller vaccine trial as successful, and on April 26, 1954, the large-scale clinical trial began. Problems did occur during the clinical trial and included the administration of multiple doses to a single child, the reuse of needles between children, the loss of records, and even illness and death following vaccination.
The fuck?
The trial, which involved over 1.3 million children, of whom over 600,000 received at least one dose of vaccine, ended in the late spring of 1954. It took, however, nearly a year for the results to be evaluated and publicly presented. On April 12, 1955, at an official press conference scheduled specifically to discuss the outcomes of the field trial, Dr. Thomas Francis reported Salk's vaccine to be between 60 and 70% effective at preventing paralytic polio. The 1954 vaccine was, however, reported to be ineffective at preventing non-paralytic polio. Within 2 hours of the announcement, the U.S. Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, a newly formed government agency which encompassed the Public Health Service, voted to approve the vaccine for use. Even though it was not yet known if Salk's vaccine would be approved for use, preparations had already been made to ensure that the vaccine would be available immediately for commercial use. 6 pharmaceutical companies had manufactured 9 million vaccines in advance. And these vaccines became available for use by the American public right after approval. Now, we're going to jump ahead in the report, but we will be coming back to the portion we are skipping right now. If you are following along on the link provided, we are skipping down to an italicized set of paragraphs, several paragraphs down. There were 18,308 cases of paralytic polio and 20,168 cases of non-paralytic polio in 1954. In 1955, the year that Salk's vaccine received approval, this number had decreased to 13,000 paralytic cases, down from 20,000, and 15,000 non-paralytic cases. 13,000 paralytic cases down from 18,000, and 15,000 non-paralytic cases down from 20,000. Incidentally, diagnosing criteria for polio also changed, which is what she was talking about a little bit there. In 1953, there were no set criteria or guidelines for the diagnosing of poliomyelitis. A scientific report published from a panel discussion held in 1960 by Illinois State Medical Society noted that, quote, prior to 1954, any physician who reported paralytic poliomyelitis was doing his patient a service by way of subsidizing the cost of hospitalization and was being community-minded in reporting a communicable disease. The criterion of diagnosis at that time in most health departments followed the World Health Organization definition. Spinal paralytic poliomyelitis. Signs and symptoms of non-paralytic poliomyelitis with the addition of partial or complete paralysis of one or more muscle groups detected on 2 examinations at least 24 hours apart. Note that 2 examinations at least 24 hours apart was all that was required. Laboratory confirmation and presence of residual paralysis was not required. In 1955, the criteria was changed to conform more closely to the definition used in the 1954 field trials. Residual paralysis was determined 10 to 20 days after onset of illness, and again 50 to 70 days after onset. The influence of the field trials is still evident in most health departments. Unless there is residual involvement at least 60 days after onset, a case of poliomyelitis is not considered paralytic. The report also went on to state that this change in definition meant that in 1955 we started reporting a new disease, namely paralytic poliomyelitis, with a longer-lasting paralysis. Furthermore, diagnostic procedures have continued to be refined. Coxsackie virus definitions and aseptic meningitis have been distinguished. Yeah, it's Coxsackie, I swear to God. I copied and pasted, that's what it says. Have been distinguished from paralytic, that'd be different, paralytic poliomyelitis. Prior to 1954, large numbers of these cases undoubtedly were mislabeled as paralytic poliomyelitis. Thus, simply by changes in diagnostic criteria, the number of paralytic cases was predetermined to decrease in 1955 to 1957, whether or not any vaccine was used. At the same time, the number of non-paralytic cases was bound to increase because any case of poliomyelitis-like disease which could not be classified as paralytic poliomyelitis according to the new criteria was classified as non-paralytic poliomyelitis. So, end report. What we see here is that the history of this is kind of fucking messy. Because polio was legitimately widespread, even if defining it wasn't easy to do. But what I like in there, stepping off scripture, what I like in there is that it said that any doctor that was classifying his patients as having polio was doing them a service because now they could be taken care of by the county, whereas, probably their parents wouldn't have had
the money
to put them in the hospital. Yeah. Candace has mentioned the most basic information about polio to this point, but she hasn't really talked about how it spreads. The primary pathway for polio infection is known as the fecal-oral route, which does not necessarily involve eating ass.
Imagine you catch polio from eating somebody's ass.
Yeah. See, that's how we know it's been long gone, because that's such a thing these days.
Well, see, the fucking the Coxsackie virus.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
Sounds like something you get yelled at fucking recess.
Mm-hmm.
At something you'd get yelled at recess as a thing of like, your mom's got Coxsackie virus.
Right.
That's why I was over here
like
giggling.
Yeah.
That's why I was over here giggling like a fucking 13-year-old, because I'm sitting there thinking of all the things you could possibly use that for.
Well, the fact that like a lot of these things are named after the people that find them.
Oh.
I just have to imagine that Coxsackie is someone's like last name, like their proud family last name that they get into modern times and they're like, I think pride is overrated. I think we need to go back to the drawing board on this one.
Especially if you consider a lot of old family names came from what they did as a profession.
Right.
That's like, did my great-great-great-great-grandmother just give particularly good head at the whorehouse? Is this where this comes from?
She was known as the hand job queen. She had two hands and she used them both. But yeah, the primary pathway for polio infection is known as the fecal oral route, which does not necessarily involve eating ass.
Oh, so you've literally got that written in the skit.
Oh yeah, I do. It's right there in the script. Yeah. See?
Oh yeah. There it is.
The virus itself is excreted by infected persons and can spread by way of contaminated hands, food, or water. It can also spread via respiratory droplets, but this is far less common, but no less effective. Basically, an infected person can sneeze or cough and spread it if someone inhales the droplets. But none of this was known or suspected for a long time. One of the things that helped stop polio were, of course, public health campaigns and cleaner water systems. And an area where polio has been making a comeback is in the Ukraine war. Among children, it's more of a consequence of public systems being destroyed than actual planning, I hope. If you pair poor systems with a lack of vaccine, then you have real problems. This has also been a cause of concern in Gaza, with Israel either denying or destroying vaccines that were supposed to go to Gaza. Mm-hmm. Or bombing, people when they're trying to get vaccinated. It's real fucked up.
Yeah.
This is an issue in other war-torn parts of the world as well. It sucks. Now, the link I provided for all of this is going to have a secondary use in the link stack as well, because what Candace is about to say is also covered in that information. And here's her.
And how effective was the polio vaccine when it was first rolled out? Well, they don't tell you that they actually harmed a ton of children and paralyzed people in the first rollout, but because people were lining up to get this. And of course, when the government rushes anything out, it's usually not a good idea, and you can't take account of how much harm it's caused until after. Well, it is now after, and we can take a look at exactly what happened. So the vaccine was created by a man named Jonas Salk. It was, of course, immediately hailed as a miracle, because every vaccine is always hailed as a miracle. And something went terribly wrong. It actually ended up being a disaster for the government, which caused a lot of children to get sick. Roughly 40,000 children got abortive polio and experienced fever, sore throat, headache, vomiting, and muscle pain. 51 of them were paralyzed, and 5 of them died. This became known as the Cutter incident, and there is a book on it. You can read about it online. It's how America's first polio vaccine led to the growing vaccine crisis, is one book that's out there. It is now being called one of the worst biological disasters in American history, which further contributed to the polio epidemic, because obviously they considered any type of paralysis to be polio. So you can imagine at that time, when you had children that were then being paralyzed from the vaccine itself, it created quite a predicament for the government. So do take time to learn about Jonas Salk and how this came about and how the government promoted this vaccine before they recalled it very quickly thereafter.
Yeah, we spoke about a lot of that already, but now we're going to cover the part that I skipped over in the last section. It isn't as long, but it talks about what is known as the Cutter incident. Quote from the paper, immediately following the vaccine's approval, the safety provisions which required each vaccine lot to be triple tested were no longer enforced, and vaccine manufacturers were the only ones screening their products. As a result, vaccine lots containing live poliovirus were not caught, and within 2 weeks the consequences would be apparent, when recently vaccinated children began developing polio. Cases of paralytic polio following vaccination were reported in several states, including California and Idaho. All cases occurred within 10 days of vaccination, and paralysis frequently began in the limb where the injection had been administered, not in the lower limbs of the body, as what was classically seen with paralytic polio. It was also discovered that most cases of paralysis had occurred in children vaccinated with the poliovirus vaccine manufactured by Cutter Laboratories. Public health officials did not immediately halt the poliovirus vaccination program or even stop Cutter Laboratories from manufacturing or distributing the poliovirus vaccine. Instead, U.S. Surgeon General Leonard A. Scheel called Cutter Laboratories executives on April 27th and requested that they recall all their poliovirus vaccines. Publicly, Scheel stated that there was no correlation between paralytic polio and use of the vaccine, but few believed him. Polio had also occurred in persons vaccinated with vaccines manufactured by both Eli Lilly and Wyeth, though less frequently. Additionally, cases of polio were also reported among family members of children who were administered the polio vaccine, particularly those who received vaccines made by Cutter Laboratories. The incidence of polio following vaccination continued to rise, and by May 8th of 1955, Scheel ordered that all poliovirus vaccination programs be halted until a review of the 6 poliovirus vaccine makers could be completed. 5 days after Scheel halted use of all poliovirus vaccines, the vaccines manufactured by Park Davis and Eli Lilly were cleared for use. As questions remained about the safety of the vaccine, the demand for the vaccine was much less. What was not known at the time of this incident was that National Institutes of Health microbiologist Dr. Bernice Eddy had reported to her NIH supervisors the vaccines manufactured by Cutter Laboratories in 1954 and 55 were causing paralysis in laboratory monkeys. NIH Director Dr. William Seabrill chose to ignore Eddy's findings, and her immediate supervisor called her, quote, an alarmist. While lots of poliovirus vaccine manufactured during the 1954 field trials were required to undergo strict testing prior to use, vaccines made for commercial use were not, and after the vaccine was licensed for use, Cutter Laboratories would not report problems and would simply discard vaccine lots found to be contaminated with live poliovirus. The poliovirus vaccine, manufactured by Cutter, was found to be responsible for 40,000 cases of polio, including 200 cases of severe polio and 10 deaths. There were 18,000 cases of paralytic polio and 20,000 cases of non-paralytic polio in 1954. The year that Salk's vaccine received approval, the number had decreased to 13,000 paralytic cases and 15,000 non-paralytic cases. And as we said before, incidentally, diagnosing criteria for polio also changed. In 1953, there were no set criteria or guidelines for the diagnosing of poliomyelitis, which gets us back around to where we were before. For anyone following along, the next section following, that is what we read from before regarding the testimony given in court in the italicized sections. So those numbers, 40,000 cases of polio, 200 severe cases, and 10 deaths are bad. No question about it. Especially since they had every right to believe they were being protected from the illness. However, what she isn't saying is that 1.8 million people were involved in the trials, and over 30 million were vaccinated against polio in the first year in America. That information comes from ASBMB today, and I'm including a link to the short story of this from their website. But for anyone without the time to read it, I'll read from it now, as it is not that long and contains some more interesting information about all this stuff. So take that into consideration, right? Mm-hmm. Of the 30 million, 40,000 cases.
Yeah.
It's not good.
No.
But it's better.
Yeah.
So, from ASMBMB today. Well, there we go. Lessons from how the polio vaccine went from the lab to the public that Americans can learn from today. This article is from September 26, 2020 by Carl Kurlander, Randy P. Jewell. In 1955, after a field trial involving 1.8 million Americans, the world's first successful polio vaccine was declared safe, effective, and potent. It was arguably the most significant biomedical advance of the past century. Despite the polio vaccine's long-term success, manufacturers, government leaders, and the nonprofit that funded the vaccine's development made several missteps. Having produced a documentary about the polio vaccine's field trials, we believe the lessons learned during that chapter in medical history are worth considering as the race to develop COVID-19 vaccines proceeds. Keep in mind, this article is from 2020.
Okay.
So they included a trailer from The Shot Felt Around the World, a documentary about the polio vaccine from Sabin and Salk. Today, many competing efforts are underway to create a coronavirus vaccine, each employing different methods to generate the production of universally needed antibodies. Likewise, in the 1950s, there were different approaches to making a polio vaccine. The prevailing medical orthodoxy, led by Dr. Albert Sabin, held that only a live virus vaccine, which involved using a weakened form of the polio virus to stimulate antibodies, could work. That theory stemmed from work by the physician Edward Jenner, who in the 1700s determined that milkmaids exposed to the cowpox virus-laden pus of cowpox-infected cattle did not catch smallpox. Smallpox was the deadly pandemic of the era, and this discovery led to a vaccine that brought about the disease's eradication. Dr. Jonas Edward Salk, pictured here in 1959, invented the polio vaccine based on a killed virus and famously said patenting it would be like patenting the sun. Jonas Salk, a doctor and scientist based at the University of Pittsburgh, on the other hand, believed a killed virus, which would completely lose its infectious qualities, could still trick the body into creating protective antibodies against the polio virus. A nonprofit organization, the National Infantile Paralysis Foundation, funded and thus directed the polio vaccine quest. Established by President Franklin D. Roosevelt's former law partner, Basil O'Connor, it raised money for polio research and treatment. As part of this fundraising effort, Americans were called upon to send dimes to the White House in what became known as the March of Dimes. O'Connor gambled on Salk rather than Sabin. By 1953, Salk and his team had shown their experimental vaccine worked, first on monkeys in their lab, then on children who already had polio at the D.T. Watson Home for Crippled Children, and then on a small group of healthy children in Pittsburgh. One of the largest field trials in medical history soon followed. It began on April 23, 1954. Some 650,000 children got the Salk polio vaccine or a placebo, and 1.2 million other kids received no injection but were monitored as an untreated control group. Salk's mentor, University of Michigan virologist Thomas Francis, independently monitored the study. After months of meticulously analyzing data, Francis revealed the results on April 12, 1955, exactly 10 years after President FDR's death and nearly a year after the trial began. FDR had polio.
Okay.
He got it in his 30s.
Jesus.
Yeah. He was an active, dude.
Yeah.
And he got polio in his 30s, yeah. Lessons from how the polio vaccine went from the lab to the public that Americans can learn from today, yeah. It was arguably the most significant biomedical advance of the past century. Despite the polio vaccine's long-term success, manufacturers, government leaders, and the nonprofit that funded the vaccine's development made several missteps. Yep. Actually repeated all of that. Yeah. Gotta scroll down. Yeah, here we go. So, President Dwight D. Eisenhower expressed his belief that every child should receive the polio vaccine without indicating how that would happen. Eisenhower charged Health, Education, and Welfare Secretary Oveta Culp Hobby to work out the details in coordination with Surgeon General Leonard Scheel. Congressional Democrats advocated for a plan that would make the polio vaccine free to everyone, which Hobby rejected as a, quote, backdoor to socialized medicine. Hobby also insisted...
God forbid.
Yeah. Hobby also insisted that private companies should take care of producing Salk's vaccine, licensing 6 of them to do so. However, she acknowledged that the government lacked a plan to meet the vast vaccination demand. So, a black market arose. Price gouging jacked up the cost of a dose of the vaccine, which was supposed to be $2 to $20. As a result, the well-to-do got special access to a vaccine the public had funded. The hands-off approach changed once reports surfaced that children who had received Salk's vaccine were in the hospital with polio symptoms.
Oh.
At first, Shield, the Surgeon General, reacted with skepticism. He suggested that those kids might have been infected before vaccination. But once 6 vaccinated children died, inoculations halted until more information about their safety could be gathered. In all, 10 kids who were vaccinated early on died after becoming infected with polio, and some 200 experienced some degree of paralysis, and this is the Cutter incident that we discussed. The government soon determined that the cases in which children became sick or died could be traced back to one of the 6 companies, Cutter Labs. It had not followed Salk's detailed protocol to manufacture the vaccine, failing to kill the virus. As a result, children were incorrectly injected with the live virus. Inoculation resumed in mid-June, with tighter government controls and a more nervous public. In July, Hobby stepped down, citing personal reasons. I can't imagine what they would have been. Yeah. Eisenhower then signed the Polio Vaccination Assistance Act of 1955, which slated $30 million to pay for vaccines, enough to fund wider public distribution. Within a year, 30 million American kids had been inoculated, and the number of polio cases had fallen almost by half. By 1962, there were fewer than 1,000 cases of polio in the U.S., and by 1979, the U.S. was declared polio-free. Years after the vaccine's development, Jonas Salk would recount that sometimes he would meet people who would not even know what polio was, which he found tremendously gratifying. But the events of this past year, with all the ups and downs of coronavirus vaccine research, have proved that the history of polio's defeat is worth remembering. There is more information on the site, and the article itself is a call to action in support of the COVID vaccine, as the article is from September 26 of 2020. But I liked the fleshing out of the information. It's now time for Candace to get into questions and comments. She says that she is addressing questions and comments from last week, but given that there were several months between her original 11 episodes and this one, it's really weird to hear that, unless we recall that Candace Owens is a petty liar, and then it becomes easier to digest. Before she gets into those, though, I want to note that she has not and does not go through the vaccine insert for the polio vaccine.
She doesn't?
Not once. I was prepared to hear it. And I will save everyone the time of wondering if she goes through it or not. She does not. But I feel it would be a malpractice of information sharing if we didn't touch on it. So, the polio vaccine was available as an oral vaccine from the 60s until the year 2000, when the oral vaccine was discontinued here. It is still used in other countries. The major difference between the oral and the injectable is that the oral vaccine uses a live, weakened form of polio, which we have already discussed is a fucking bad idea.
Yeah.
In rare but very real cases, this can cause a special type of polio called vaccine-derived polio. It has happened rarely but frequently enough that even though wild type 1, 2, and 3 polio were eradicated in America and much of the Western Hemisphere by 1979, vaccine-derived polio was still a thing that could happen. Both injectable polio vaccine and the oral vaccine were around from 1961 until 2000. The injectable version is the same amount of doses of the vaccine, which is 4 of them at different ages, but the virus is dead. It is killed by formaldehyde prior to leaving the vaccine maker. I am linking to a site that explains this all in greater detail from our good friends at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, or CHOP. Anyway, the injectable polio vaccine cannot cause polio, even in rare cases. It just doesn't happen. There are several different vaccine options for polio in America, and these are single antigen IPV from Sanofi Pasteur, the only standalone IPV vaccine licensed in the U.S. for infants, children, and adults. There are also combination vaccines containing IPV, such as Kinrix from GlaxoSmithKline and DTaP IPV for children aged 4 to 6. Then there's Quadricel from Sanofi, which is a DTaP IPV for children ages 4 through 6. Then there's Pediarix from GlaxoSmithKline, which is a DTaP Hep B IPV for infants and young children. There's Pentacell from Sanofi, DTaP IPV/HIB for infants and toddlers. And then there's Vexelis from Sanofi/Merck, which is a DTaP IPV, HIP, and Hep B for infants and young children. That one's just like everything.
Yeah, everything's shotgunned into one.
Yeah. We have covered non-polio vaccine versions of some of those in previous episodes, so I won't be going through them all here. But I am including a link to the single-use polio vaccine for anyone in the U.S. made by Sanofi Pasteur. It is called IPOL or IPOL. And since they include the formulation in combination vaccines, it is redundant to include every version of those. Anyway, I gave you all the names of them. If you need them, just look them up if you have questions about them. And about a day or so after this goes up, the listing with the link stack will be enhanced with a link to the transcript.
Oh yeah, because you've got to wait for the transcript time from that guy. Yeah.
So, now let's allow Candace to go through questions and answers. She is not done with her DDT bullshit, however.
All right, guys, I want to get into some of your questions and your comments from last week, so let's get into it. But I first want to show you this because I thought this was absolutely, it just blew my mind. As we were preparing for this episode, of course, I had done this series before. I had done a ton of research on polio and the polio epidemic.
Fuck you.
And it was very easy for me to find a ton of government sources that explain to you how DDT causes paralysis. It's just a known thing. And you can still find plenty of articles on NIH.government and things of that nature. But I was particularly struck by how I couldn't really find anything on the CDC website. And I so clearly remember having read about, on a recent CDC website, about how DDT causes poisoning. What did pop up when I looked up, I just simply did a Google search of DDT and paralysis and DDT and poisoning. The first article that popped up was this article from AP News. Super interesting. And the article is entitled, "Experts Say Toxic Pesticide DDT Not Linked to Polio."
No, Candace, that is not the case. Oh, sorry. That's different. That's the next one down. AP News for the win on this one. I've linked the article she mentions, and right at the top of it, it gives the claim she has been making and then proceeds to shut it the fuck down. And of course, Candace felt seen by this and talks more about it.
You know me, I always trust the experts. If the experts say it and the media tells us, then it must be true. But what really stood out to me is the date on this article, January 25th, 2023. What is going on? Why are they suddenly trying to debunk that the claim that polio could have been related to the mass spraying of DDT on society? By the way, when did they declare that polio was suddenly eradicated? In 1978. When did
79.
they stop spraying crops and people with DDT and made it so that it was no longer allowed for agricultural use in the United States? 1972. So it's just incredible. You must be a conspiracy theorist if you believe that the outbreak of paralysis that we saw could have been contributed to a chemical compound that does actually cause paralysis, and then magically the numbers went down and went away by 1978, just a few years after we stopped using that product. And again, that's just one piece of it, right? So one piece of it is we stopped using a chemical agent that was causing paralysis. The second piece of it is that they changed the diagnostic definition of polio in 1954. That is really crucial to know. They just recategorized it.
No, Candace, that is not the case, as we have demonstrated with many minutes of reading actual information. The article itself answers the question she asked, though, about why such an article would come out in 2023. In the article, it states that at the time it was written, social media users on Instagram, and as we know also YouTube, which is where she pulled the videos from, state that polio and DDT had a link which they did not have. This idea became a small trend, and of course grifters like Candace fucking latched onto it. Since they latched onto it, expect to hear about it time and again across the rest of your natural fucking lives. Yep. Mm-hmm. At least you have information to counter it all now. what we know from the information that we read is that DDT has to be in a intense concentration for a long amount of time, or a high concentration in an intentional poisoning to affect people in the way of paralysis, but usually it comes on as food poisoning, where they get stomach trouble and shit like that. Paralysis goes away after 24 hours because it's a poison, and the body excretes it, gets rid of it, etc.
Yeah. It's done and dealt with.
Yeah, it is not a fucking virus that latches onto the fucking spinal cord and causes death.
Yeah.
You know, the DDT poisoning, it sucks. No one should have to go through it, but you can get past it. Mm-hmm. Fucking polio is with you forever. So, moving on, the next clip is 3.5 minutes long. That's the only warning y'all get.
Of course, we still have Guillain-Barré syndrome. Of course, we still have meningitis and things of that nature, but people are being led to believe that polio just no longer exists anymore. I told you very early on in the story and in this series that when the government controls the means to the definitions, they can make those numbers say whatever they want. They can say, this is what COVID is. Then we say, actually, no, we now no longer consider that to be COVID. If you sneeze, you don't have COVID. I talked about that with croup. I talked about that with whooping cough. Oh, we're not even going to test you for that. When you control the means to the diagnosis, of course, you can always produce the answer you want. The science will always tell the story you want. We eradicated it. There's no more whooping cough. They're not even testing these kids for it when they're coughing for 100 days. Well, that doesn't matter. We don't do that. As long as you got the vaccine, then we consider it having been eradicated. Obviously, whooping pertussis is not eradicated just yet, but I'm using that just as an example because we spoke about it a few weeks ago. But to see this article, for me, felt like I was looking at them trying to do a mind wipe in real time, because people are obviously starting to wake up to the fact that they may have been duped by polio. Why would they suddenly in 2023 start this concerted effort to essentially say, don't look at this? And this is what the website written by Sophia Tolb at the beginning of this year. She says, claim, polio stopped spreading when the pesticide DDT stopped being used, not when vaccines for the virus were introduced. AP's assessment, these are the good guys, they say that's false. Polio vaccines are credited with ending epidemics of the disease in the United States and helping curb most cases globally. Several medical experts confirmed to the Associated Press. The disease and its side effects, including paralysis, have been widely demonstrated to be caused by the polio virus, not a pesticide, the experts said. So what they're essentially saying is to trust the experts. And this is just the wonderful conundrum of the world that we live in today. The experts are the reason that there was a mass poisoning in this country. There is no doubt that these children and adults were poisoned throughout this entire decade. You can't deny that. They won't deny that. They talk about why they stopped using it quietly. Oh, we didn't have the EPA, but now we realize it's wrong. No, maybe don't get that wallpaper. It was the experts that forced people into doing the thing that was wrong for their health, that was detrimental to their health. It was the experts that then produced a vaccine that led to further paralysis and further instances of children being sick. And despite the experts being wrong, one of the beautiful things about being an expert is never having to admit you're wrong. So when people start to discover and they look into the history of DDT and they watch these horrific videos and they see children being sprayed on the streets and they watch these children that are being sprayed while they're eating lunch and they go, wait a second, I actually can research what this chemical compound is and what it does. And people start to put the dots together and they realize, how funny. You're telling me we stopped using this agent and suddenly polio was eradicated? Well, could this potentially mean? Then they say, hold up, we're going to get the experts back. We're going to get the experts back to explain to you why what you're thinking is a conspiracy theory. Government never gets it wrong. Of course, no. They're the ex-scientists never get it wrong. It's science. It's always science. That's what they tell us, which is why it is so important to continue to prod the narrative. All right, guys, let's jump into some of your questions and comments from episodes past.
Okay, I am not sorry that I let that play out. What we see here in this clip is one of the building blocks of fascism. One of the key things that fascists do, and have done, regardless of culture in which it rises up, is make experts in scientific fields receive more doubt than they deserve. Now, this podcast was from 2023, about a year or so before Candace declared herself a theocratic fascist. Candace does it with this, comparing COVID to polio. Now, anyone that was paying attention in the main phase of COVID, because it is not over, and may be with us forever, knows that a simple cough, sneeze, the flu, or a head cold was not automatically declared to be COVID. Tests for COVID, such as the PCR nasal swab test, were developed rapidly and rolled out as fast as they could be made. Think you have COVID? Do this nasal swab. Simple. A PCR also exists for whooping cough, and I will never believe the story that Candace told about her nephew, because we know that she lies as often as possible about every damn thing when it comes to this stuff. But back to the point. Candace sowing doubt about the actual effectiveness of experts weighing in on important subjects is something that fascists and cult leaders are known to do. There is a lot of overlap, and it all comes down to control. A person supporting fascist versions of the world will not want people to put any kind of faith in expert opinions, because so much of what passes in early fascism before laws are made supporting their moves, so much of what happens is that they want you to believe that the experts are seeking to control your life, and the fascist wants you to have your freedom to live as you will, free of the opinions of people more learned or more capable than you, and likely more learned and capable than themselves. Once the experts are either disposed of or on the side of the fascist, such as we see happening in real time at Health and Human Services under RFK Jr., we begin to see the real mechanisms of control being used to silence, crowd out, and deny actual experts trying to work for the collective good. And for what reason? I believe it is the almost constant desire of the fascist to have a slave underclass. They need people to be disposable and useful for their labor. To that end, they can't have people that would catch, say, polio. They can't have the people that would be killed by polio around. Those are the people that would not survive with a worse sewage system. Those are the people that modern life with antiseptics and things like that, those are the people that continue to live because of the modern world. And those things are expensive to give out. Think of how cheap it would be to have people working on projects or in the fields, and all you have to do is the absolute bare minimum to keep them alive. One gets a disease of any kind that keeps them from working and they aren't getting better, then that person is now disposable. That person is not a person to the fascist. They are a useless waste of resources, and they are dealt with in that manner. American fascism is taking this course by way of people such as Candace Owens. In this case, she was not only allowed to say these things about experts in the manner of classic fascist arguments, she was supported in it. Now, she will actually get into viewer comments.
These first set of comments are regarding inductions. We talked about it last episode, and I just wanted to get a lot of your feedback on it and the pressure that a lot of women are getting to induce when there's nothing wrong with their pregnancy. And of course, we did share with you some circumstances where, it might be the right decision to induce. Induction can be a blessing, and sometimes induction does save the life of the mother and the baby, but now it sort of feels like they just want you to have the baby by 40 weeks. Thorn Drossel writes, I refused induction, got a VBAC, refused shots. The doctor sarcastically said when my baby was out that they'd sprinkle granola in the air now. Oh, and I also made them delay cord clamping until it turned white, which they found to be annoying as well. Yeah, I am also an annoying mother, so I can totally relate to that, but it feels great to be pregnant and feel like you're in control of your pregnancy and not like you are just being viewed as the same person with the same body as every single individual woman. So it feels like you sort of take control of your health when you actually educate yourself about these things.
Again, and it was said before, but I am pretty sure that the medical field as a whole is well aware that everyone is different. Mm-hmm. However, people like Candace will tell you that diversity is bullshit and it is not a strength. Meanwhile, she has mixed-race children.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Next.
Lisa Hancock writes, have been a nurse for 40 plus years, and yes, it has increased dramatically since I worked in the mother-baby area. A lot of it is for convenience for the doctors and or the patients. That is what it's being used for, not due to issues with labor or delivery. Probably also the bottom line for the pharmaceutical industry as well. But everyone wants to control the timing of a baby's birth nowadays. They don't allow them to come naturally because it might cause an inconvenience to someone. You know, our instant gratification society has to have it now and on my time. Yeah, and you get that feeling with a lot of doctors where there are certain circumstances where they say, well, I have a vacation, so let's induce you. I actually really, really love my OBGYN. I remember when I was having my daughter last year, he was going on vacation to Alaska, and he was like, well, we'll induce you before I go on vacation. And I was like, no, I don't think I will be timing my daughter's birth according to your vacation. And of course, he was saying this because we had built up familiarity, and he was really being loving when he said that, because he knew how strict I was about not wanting to do certain things post-birth, and that would have probably been an easier process for me had I had agreed to induce and had him be the OBGYN. But yeah, no, that wasn't just something that was going to work for me.
Proof here again that this episode is many months after the last one. Mm-hmm. Not just a few weeks or a week, as she has been saying. She was pregnant with the daughter, the second child in episode 11, and is pregnant with kid number 3 6 months along in this episode, number 12.
Yeah.
But Candace never says any of that. She just acts as if time did not move on during her life in recording these episodes. It is almost amazing. As for the nurse that wrote in saying that labor inductions had increased in her life of work, I mean, okay. But this is the kind of expert that should set Candace's nerves on edge, except that she is saying what Candace wants to hear. As far as an actual fact about labor induction, I looked it up. Labor induction has risen sharply over the period from 1989, when Candace was born, to 2020, which is the scope of the article. They rose from 9% on average to 31%. Most of those have been elective inductions, meaning they were not deemed medically needed. Scheduling and convenience are common reasons listed, but I also think part of it could be due to the patchwork of labor and work laws in this country. A person that gives birth in other countries is often supported by national labor laws that allow them to take a long leave of absence from work without worrying about whether or not their job will be available to them later. Obviously, that is not the case for most pregnant people in America. Partner or spouse leave is also unheard of in most of America. A pregnant person has to get that kid out as soon as possible, maybe take some time with the little one, like a weekend or less even, and is expected to return to work ASAP. If you live outside of America and that sounds horrible, it is the state of things here and has been for a long time. It is one of the arguments that fascists use for why women should not be a major player in the workforce. I believe the rise of birth induction can be tied directly to a lack of rights regarding medical leave post-labor. Next clip.
Madison Mill writes, while I do agree with Candace, I am glad that I was induced with my son. I was 40 weeks, 4 days pregnant when I woke up, and he was barely moving in the womb. I went to my doctor's office, got checked, and he wasn't moving much at all. Less than 8 hours later, he was healthy and in my arms, and the cord had been wrapped around his neck twice. Modern medicine has its place, but it shouldn't be forced upon those for no good reason. Yeah, there are plenty of instances, and I hope that came across in the last episode where I spoke about how induction has been great and how it has saved certain babies' lives. Obviously, we talked about certain circumstances, like when your child is really large, where it can actually present some sort of a threat, but it's not one size fits all, and that really is the purpose of what we're saying. And it does feel that big pharma and the medical industry is trying to make it one size fits all. You have to know your own body. You feel connected with your child. You felt like your child needed to get out, and obviously that was the right decision for you. A happy baby is always what you want the end result to be.
Time for the rare. Good job, Candace. I can agree with her stance on that clip. Induction is right in some cases, and obviously, as we quoted a moment ago, 31% of births is not an overwhelming majority of births being induced, but it is a high number. In this case, it was the right call, and this mother and kid are only alive likely because medical science, run by experts for many years, made it possible for the result to happen.
Mm-hmm. Who'd have thunk it?
Yeah.
Who'd have known?
Who could possibly foresee this? You know? Ugh. Next clip.
The Bippy May writes, it's an epidemic. I'm a midwife in Australia. I see firsthand a negative impact of inductions. There are genuine reasons for induction, but most are not necessary. Not sure how it works in the USA, but in Australia, if we need to see a specialist, a doctor, we have to be referred by a general practitioner. If I asked for a referral to a renal surgeon, just in case, I would be denied because I don't have any sign of kidney disease. Why are women being referred to obstetricians when there is no problem? Pregnancy is a normal part of life. Obstetricians are needed occasionally, not for every birth. They can't help themselves. They see pathology and step in to save women and babies when they would be just fine without the interference.
Yeah, I looked into this, and it is not as rare as this Australian midwife says. For a pregnant person to see an obstetrician during pregnancy or during labor. I'm including a link to raisingchildren.net.au that goes into more detail, but basically, a GP, general practitioner, does most of the work for a pregnant person, checking vitals, keeping records, and so on. And if a pregnancy goes well and the labor is done in a hospital, an obstetrician will be there to make sure everything keeps going well. The GP is rarely involved at that point. However, if there are any issues, the pregnant person is referred by a GP, either public or privately, if they have that as part of their health package. Or is referred to an obstetrician, either publicly or privately, if they have that as part of their health package. People that choose to do a home birth may just have a midwife present, and home births are generally ruled as fine if there are no concerns during the pregnancy. It is hardly as rare as the commenter puts out there, even in Australia. I think what I find most offensive about this one is that the commenter was using maybe her own experience or observation as a de facto rule of how things are without bothering to look into how things actually are. And for Candace and her small team to not bother to look into this in any way and to just present it as absolute fact is fucking wrong on so many levels. Next up.
Yeah, this goes into the idea that pregnancy is seen as a medical condition. Now it's like something's wrong with you. How are we going to get this baby out? How are we going to fix this? Women go into it with so much fear. They don't trust their bodies. They don't know what to expect. And it's never... It is, I think, compounded, that fear, when you speak to other mothers who started on the induction journey. And then, of course, one induction means 1,000 other things that you have to do that can possibly go wrong. And I think that contributes. People share their birth stories and people are horrified by them. And really, when I speak to parents that are still giving birth at their home, things seem to go a lot more smoothly. It just, and that's not always the circumstance. Of course, things can go wrong no matter what. That is a condition of humanity. But I think now people are set to believe that it will go wrong unless you trust your care to Big Pharma and you get that baby out right at 40 weeks. And that's just not true. I do think that we need to have a wider education when it comes to birth.
Again, here we have a bullshit comparison. Candace herself has had every birth of her 4 kids in a hospital. I'm including 2 links in the link stack about the rise of home births in America and the problems they can present. One is from a resource called Stat News, and the other is from NPR. Both are informative for anyone thinking about home birth versus hospital birth. In America, it is a pregnant person's choice where to give birth, but there are some obvious reasons why a hospital is probably the best place. By sheer numbers alone, hospitals are safer and better equipped if there are any issues during the procedure, because that is pretty much why they exist. Next, Candace is going to orally fellate an old associate.
This is an email from Jonathan. He writes that Robert Kennedy Jr. was recently on Joe Rogan and talked extensively in the beginning about vaccines and has been known for questioning vaccines for years, and does this to protect the kids. What do you think about him and what he has to say about vaccines and the things that he has researched and talked about? Thanks. Jonathan, I think I covered this a couple of episodes ago when I showed that clip of him from on Joe Rogan and talked about how what he was doing was brave. Personally, obviously this podcast is not meant to be about politics, but you obviously know that I am a conservative, and for a variety of reasons, I wouldn't vote for RFK, but I am so glad that he is running. I think that he is doing so much to awaken parents about Big Pharma. He's done so much work that helped to awaken me. So I am not one of those people that goes, oh, well, he's on the left, so I would never listen to him. Actually, the entire reason, a huge piece of the reason that I'm doing this podcast is because Children's Health Defense, which was created by him, exists, and I was able to do independent research because of what he had done before me. So this, fortunately, is an issue when it comes to our children where there is no left and right, and I think the work that he is doing in that space is positively wonderful.
Robert fucking Kennedy Jr. This fucking guy. I probably don't have to say much about him, but for those who don't remember or don't know, around 2023, the waste of human flesh, known as RFK Jr., was a Democrat for most of his life, up until he realized that he was not going to get the presidential nomination for the party, and he switched up to being an independent in 2023. Then he went ball-gagging for Trump in 2024, when Trump promised him a job if he got in. Children's Health Defense has been an anti-vax organization and has made several false claims about childhood diseases being caused by things such as Wi-Fi, fluoride, vaccines, and certain medicines. It's a bullshit outfit that lost a lot of social media presence over the years for its misinformation and push for bullshit. I really hope that I don't have to cover them much, because a lot of other places have done so already. But basically, the fucked things happening at the HHS, CDC, and other alphabet agencies connected to HHS are due to RFK Jr. doing almost exactly the platform pushed by Children's Health Defense. If you want to know what their platform was, look at what he has been doing. I said all of that to say that I am not linking to that company. You can look them up if you want to do so.
I remember there was a joke back in 2021, I want to say it was. Some YouTubers I was watching, I don't remember what their channel name is now, but they produced some funny but really stupid VR content. One of the things that they were doing on one of the maps was they found somebody's replica of a 5G antenna.
Yeah.
And they go, "Oh no, I'm gonna get ball cancer. Run away. You'll get ball cancer if you get too close." And I was sitting there and I'm like, what the fuck are they going on about? So I looked it up and I was like, really? Ball cancer from fucking...
Yeah.
What did he do? Sit on the goddamn thing, teabag it, rub his raw sack against it?
Up and down. I did my squats on it. I did nude squats on the 5G antenna. Yeah, I mean, there was so much bullshit going on before the rollout of 5G, and I swear I could never prove it. But I swore that most of the people pushing the 5G bullshit had to be like people that were leasing their land for 4G towers.
Yeah.
Because 5G doesn't require those towers. I mean, it's good if they're there. They can stack a shitload they can stack a shitload of 5G antennas on one of those. But I've also seen a shitload of 5G antennas on the backside of a Best Buy in Jacksonville. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and tell y'all how to find this. If you're in Jacksonville, Florida, the St. John's Town Center, there's a Best Buy there. Next to that Best Buy is a big-ass golf store that I don't remember the name of, or at least it was. We've been here for 3 years. I don't care if it's burned down. I don't give a fuck. Anyway, back when we were there, I used to visit that Best Buy frequently for shipped pickups. And on the backside of that Best Buy, there were at least 5G antennas that were facing out towards some apartments in the back of the place.
Okay.
Now, I recognized them for what they were. I asked the people at Best Buy about it, and they were like, yeah, whatever phone company, I think Verizon had a desk in there at one point. Mm-hmm. They had paid to put those up, and they just had them there. I was like, okay, so I get it, right? If you're in the store and you're thinking about getting a Verizon phone, then you could just like approach those guys and be like, yeah, look at how great our network is. It can even get a signal in this store. Like, yeah, because you've got a fucking signal repeater on top of the building.
I mean, that's a smart way of doing it. Like,
yeah. But you couldn't see them from the front.
Yeah.
You could only see them from the backside. Yeah.
Like I said, that's a smart way of doing it.
Yeah, it's a really smart way of doing it. Yeah, especially if someone's like, "Oh man, I've got such a weak signal from my, T-Mobile, AT&T, Mint, whoever the fuck you're using," and they're like, "Oh really? Well, on Verizon, if you've got 5G, you'd get a great signal in this store." You know?
See, I
Like-
think that's what's great about the people up here at fucking T-Mobile.
Yeah.
They aren't on commission, so they're not really trying to sell
Yeah.
you anything. They
They're not
might make a
trying.
little extra, but
They're not trying hard at all. I love those people.
just the laid back nonchalance of them going, yeah, we sell phones.
Yeah.
You want a fucking phone?
Yeah. You could get that. Do you want a case with it? Are you going to get one on Amazon? All right, that's cool, dog.
Oh, yeah. Do you need a charge? Oh, you've already got like 15? All right.
Yeah. Figured I'd ask. God.
You want some insurance on that? No, you trust yourself? Risky move, but okay.
Yeah.
You do you.
So, you know, like I said, though, about RFK Jr. Next, we have the first email of this episode, the final email of this episode, rather. It is frankly disturbing. The concerned parent that wrote it is one reason why we do this show. Just take a listen.
Finally, we have this email from Becca. She writes, I am definitely a victim, using that term lightly, of a doctor pushing me on the research I did for vaccines. And she said that they couldn't keep my son unless he was vaccinated. My husband and I didn't want to complicate the potential for schools in the future, so we gave in. It doesn't help that insurance complicates things because it's difficult to pay out of pocket for doctors. Recently, though, that changed. We have a new doctor that doesn't work with insurance and works on a monthly subscription type of basis. Long story short, we have medical freedom with our children for the first time. I think she's pro-vax, but does not require that of her patients and is definitely open to research. Check it out at purefamilymedicine.org. I just finished the second episode of your show, and my husband and I are definitely no longer going to vaccinate our children. It's just wild what's going on. What I want to know, though, is have I failed my son already? He's a 19-month-old and has received his vaccinations through his 12-month appointment. He has not yet received his 18-month shots, and he won't. Our daughter is now 3 months, and she has gotten her 2-month vaccine. Is it too late for us? Is my son destined to be sick a lot, or will things get better since we won't get any more injections? Love the show. Love your work. Wish I could work for the Daily Wire. Thanks so much for everything you do. In peace, Becca.
Okay, so I know you all heard it. Becca is concerned that her kids are partially vaxxed, concerned that she failed them as a parent based on all of the bullshit she has been spoon-fed by people like Candace. I looked up the company she mentioned, and the family plan for them is $249 per month with a $100 one-time buy-in. So $100 and then $250 a month after that. Or whatever. It's like $100 to buy in, and then you got to pay $250 a month forever. Which, compared to actual insurance rates, is either very low or very high, considering that it purports to be a way for patients to be able to see a doctor as often as they need to with no copays. As of this writing, a night before recording, they have less than 50 reviews on Google, most positive, but they only operate a few clinics in Texas and Colorado. My hackles are raised on businesses like this one since I was suckered into joining one previously. I've mentioned it before, but these services have a lot of drawbacks and they are not insurance. As much as healthcare insurance can really suck, it is better to be insured than not. So if you're thinking about going with one of these concierge services, get a total perspective on it before you sign up. In a lot of cases, you are locked into their doctors, the same as insurance, but there is no mechanism in place to deal with your care if you travel out of your area and you have to see a doctor. Insurance sucks, and I long for a single-payer system, but we have what we have here. I recommend avoiding these services unless you really think it would work for you, and you have a way to try it out without fucking yourself over. I am not linking to this one. Now we will hear Candace's response to this email.
Becca, and to every other parent, you did not fail your kids by doing your absolute best with the knowledge that you had. Obviously, we spent a lot of time this episode unpacking just how sinister these campaigns can be, how aggressive these big pharma campaigns can be, especially when they're fear-based and they're meant to make you think that if you don't do this, then your child is going to die and that you're being irresponsible. So it's actually really difficult for parents to stand up to that. And it would be weird to immediately not trust doctors and big pharma and to believe in some big government conspiracy that's backed by money. That's not we don't want to naturally lean towards something that would be a really rather large conspiracy. But this conspiracy is real. I believe that this conspiracy is real. Big Pharma is real. And I am happy that we are now in an environment where so many parents can see that post-COVID. I will say it over and over again. COVID in that measure was a gift. It was a blessing from God. And you are somebody who obviously is awake now, and you are making decisions not based on fear, but based on your own rationality. You know, you pray for your children. You don't say that there's anything wrong with your children right now. And as I said, it's not one size fits all. There are some people that get every vaccine and their children are fine. And then there are a ton of people who sign up those children for the exact same vaccines and they suffer the consequences. So pray for your children as I pray for mine, and as I pray for children all around the world to be healthy, and for parents to awaken to a lot of the lies.
That is the second to last clip, and in that clip we have her appeal to emotion rather than facts. Saying things like, some parents give their kids every vaccine and they're fine, and some do the same and suffer the consequences. Like, what the fuck? That is some unhinged shit to say to the scared parents hanging on her every word and buying it because she is a charismatic liar of the highest degree.
God.
But now it is time to listen to the last clip.
All right, guys, that is all the time that we have for today. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of A Shot in the Dark. I cannot wait to hear your comments because I know that this is just going to send you down the rabbit hole. Polio for me was the big one. It was just that last one where I was like, oh, we eradicated polio. And then I was like, wait a minute. No, we didn't. Be sure to be following the Instagram page, by the way. That is at Shot in the Dark DW. Also, challenge yourself to get somebody else to follow the Shot in the Dark DW page because it's really funny, and it's also where we post all of our links and our resources from each episode. You guys, see you next time.
Like how she says, challenge them to follow it. Oh, that's about it? This is kind of sinister tone. Why did it turn sinister at the end there?
Because it's sinister to begin with.
Yeah, but like...
Okay, so I actually briefly installed Instagram again and looked for a Shot in the Dark DW, and I came up empty.
Oh, of course, again, I don't need that tainting my algorithm.
Yeah.
I was going to say, you could have just asked me,
No.
but
No.
Then you'd taint my carefully crafted algorithm.
Yeah. You know, I'm pretty sure that when Daily Wire cut ties with Candace, it burned that account as well.
Oh, likely, yeah.
I can't imagine what kind of things that she thought were funny that people posted there. Oof. But also, I left the ending theme music in because none of you had heard it before. Anyway, it's time to drink something from across the world.
And that something is... I have it in my memory. It is a lemonade soda.
I mean, do you want to look it up with your little...
I mean, I could, but I was trying to memorize it.
Okay.
God. Okay. I mean, I already have Translate open because I needed to write something.
Okay, so what is it?
Kalinov lemonade. Classic lemonade flavor.
Where's it from?
It doesn't say, but it's directly translated in Russian, so...
So, yeah, okay, so...
Likely it's either a Russian or a border country.
Yeah, like Ukraine or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But it doesn't have a specified location as to where it's from. Mm-hmm. I also didn't think to look up Kalinov's. But, that also being said, on the very back of it, it says, I couldn't find a percentage, mind, but it does say it is a soft alcoholic beverage.
Yeah.
Soft carbonated alcoholic beverage.
Yeah.
So, yet
you
another...
Just be able to twist it off.
Yeah. It's got
it's got the little seal on it. Okay.
Yeah.
It's got a little, like, paper seal.
That had a hiss.
Yeah.
Should have opened that one closer to the mic, but...
Oh, yeah. It's got a twist off cap. Anyway. Yep.
Oh, and it's developing some fog.
peel. Keep going.
I got to the nose.
Okay.
All right.
There's mine. Oh, it is lemony, but not like Fabuloso Pine Sol Cleaner lemony.
No. I got a bit more. You want?
Yeah. Okay.
Holy shit! I've got a lot more.
Yeah. This bottle's big. It's way more than 12 ounces. You see the bottle? Okay. I just thought maybe there was something down in the bottom.
A little rind of
Well, it's
lemon,
holding
likely.
its fizz pretty well, so.
Yeah, and it. Oh, you're going. Okay.
Damn. That is good.
That is good.
The lemon flavor, for me, it's like when you have like a lemon warhead.
I've never, because by the time I got around to having warheads,
Yeah.
they were absolute shit.
Okay,
they
well-
were no longer like the.
Well,
the
lemon
sour
warheads
candy.
would have like the sour all around them. Mm-hmm. And once you got rid of that, you have this really good lemon candy.
Okay.
This is right around that lemon candy flavor.
I mean, it does have a really like. It's not like Southerner lemonade sweet, but
It's not overly sweet.
Yeah, no, which is nice.
Yes, it's actually quite good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once again, we got this and 3 others from the very excellent unpaid plug, Paradise Market in Hopkins. I also got a bunch of other shit while we were there.
Yeah.
I got 1.5 pounds of that ham.
Yeah.
Oh my god! And they gave me a bonus loaf of bread.
Oh yeah.
I got white bread
Okay.
because I hadn't had that yet.
I'm assuming you're making a sandwich either later or tomorrow.
Oh, tomorrow definitely. Yeah, I'm still like full up from
Yeah.
lunch. Yeah, we
Which I've got to finish my pastrami sandwich.
Yeah,
my
we-
pastrami and corned beef sandwich.
yeah we had lunch at this excellent Jewish restaurant here called Crossroads Delicatessen, which is on Hopkins Crossroad in like the Hopkins to Ridgedale area of Minnetonka. And Crossroads Delicatessen. Like they have an extensive, like really good menu. But let me tell you something. When you look at the menu, and you see that they've got like a pastrami sandwich and a corned beef sandwich, and then they've got one called Kevin's Combo, I think it was.
Yeah, Kevin's combo.
Yeah.
The combo spelled with K.
Yeah. But that has pastrami and corned beef as like the things. Here's the deal. That has about 1 pound of meat on it.
Yeah.
Their burgers are similarly a no fuck around situation.
I got it the last time I was there, and I didn't see it on the menu this time, which
Yeah.
tells me it might have been like a special or something.
Yeah.
It was a burger, beef bacon, of course, Jewish restaurant, and fucking corned beef.
No, that was there.
That was
Not the corned beef. The pastrami one was there.
the pastrami one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the pastrami burger.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Pastrami
is-
burger was
It is
phenomenal.
it is a 10-ounce burger that they cook to order.
Yeah.
So if you order it rare, you're going to get it rare. But it is a 10-ounce burger that, like you said, they top off with bacon if you want it, but it has like 4 ounces of pastrami on it.
Yeah.
And you
plus
don't
the
realize
burger.
how much pastrami that is until it arrives, and you've got a fucking dagwood of meat sitting in front of you.
Yeah.
But,
and they also put on like tomato and shit on there
Yeah,
too.
everything
Now-
is included. Yeah.
Now on the Kevin's combo, it is just because they have pepper jack cheese that they put on
Yeah.
it too. So it goes bread, cheese,
Pile
and
of
then
meat.
a pile of mixed pastrami and corned beef.
Yeah, where it's like layered. It's like it's like you got a corned beef and a pastrami like layered
Yeah, on
all
top
the
of
way
each
up.
other.
Yeah,
And then cheese again, bread, and then that shit is treated like a goddamn grilled cheese. It's not paninied, it's grilled cheesed.
yeah. And then they cut it in half and they send it out with whatever your side item is. I had gotten the broasted chicken. Now, If you're listening to this point, you're like, what the fuck is roasted chicken? I'm going to tell you. It is a thing that I have only seen here. I think they might do it in other states in the Midwest, but I've only seen it since we moved. Roasted chicken, as best as I know, is basically chicken that's been marinated for a long time and whatever. And then it's like double battered and deep fried, or it's pressure fried. I think pressure fried is usually what it is. Kind of like they do at KFC. But yeah, it's pressure fried. So what you get, regardless of what piece you get, is you get like this crispy, fatty, terrible for you, but very delicious fried chicken that is just absolutely the bomb. It's so good. I had gotten mine with their baked beans, which I'd never had before, that are excellent. They are so good. And their mashed potatoes and gravy, which I had also not had before, but now I can't imagine my life without. We got some stuff in their bakery area. And yeah, it's just, I have nothing bad to say about that place. Every time we go, it's always like a fucking food revelation.
Yeah.
Which I can say for a lot of the places we have here that are our favorite spots. I think the next time, though, that we need to do a Hopkins run, we should hit the Tibetan place.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
We'll hit the Tibetan place.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Well, that is it for now. Hopefully, I don't feel the need to put another 3 weeks between episodes, but y'all heard everything that I read. That was a lot of shit to look up, to debunk, to find, to fucking feel like I had to explain, because polio and DDT poisoning are not the same fucking thing. And you're going to hear more about that as vaccinations are under assault in this country. That's it, though. That's all I got. You got anything else?
I've not got much, nothing, no.
Okay, cool. Well, that's it, everybody. Hopefully we see you again in a couple of weeks. Bye.
Bye.